fågel!
Vi får små innanen. Ikke.
Erkelän kofte! Bananel!
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Longhouse, a true right show about politics, philosophy, art, and more from a Nordic perspective. First off, I'm gonna wish welcome to my usual co-host, Luddic Path. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks. I'm excited to be back. So we're going to look at some cool topics today.
Yes. First off, I want to thank you for creating this nice background that you can all see here, as well as the new thumbnail that you all had to look at while you were waiting for the show. I really enjoy it, so I think it's going to be nice.
It is a little too commercial for this type of show, but we need the clicks, so hopefully it seems to have worked.
It seems to have worked. Yes, we were talking about it earlier that we both hate doing optimization work on like the marketing side stuff, but yes, it pays off. So soon we're gonna have one of those YouTube thumbnails with the walrus character probably doing some insane expression and some half naked woman or something.
Mouth is always open, and there's like you say, there's a woman there, and
yeah,
some other stuff spinning in the background. Neon colors, of course. We're gonna start having the like the Speed Racer synthwave car that's going to be in the background of like every.
Also, yes, I included. I see in the chat, everyone welcome the realization that Ape Tor had passed away a couple of is it months or weeks ago now, and that's why I included him in the intro as a final send off, so to speak.
Yeah, I didn't know about him before he passed. Actually,
I knew about him
doing what he loved.
He really did. Yes, an inspiration.
Salute.
Yes, F's in the chat. Late November, says Finkel. Yes. So today we're going to talk about metapolitics, and we're going to start off specifically talking about the alt media in Norway. And so it's going to start off a bit Norway centric, but I think it broadens as we go on into sort of strategies for trying to influence alt media and thoughts about what we can possibly do.
Yes, it's going to be a bit of a continuation. We've already done an episode on the sort of Nordic media landscape. We looked at a few of these more kind of alt media, dissident media, and you're picking up on some of those threads.
Yes, this is also kind of why I wanted to start with trying to get as many of the overview episodes in before we started diving deeper. So if anything is not making sense or we're making references to a party or something like that, there is a backlog of episodes of the Longhouse that you can go and look at to get more information about what we're talking about.
Yes, you have to watch 12 hours of stream and read 20 pages of documentation before you can understand this stream. But we assume right. Everybody's done their homework. So
yes, and unfortunately, you're going to have to read. I'm sorry. I know we talked a bit about this as well, Luddic. I think it was after the last stream about this the right sphere online and view numbers, and it was coming off of something that I think Academic Agent talked about, where where people have been hounding him about how it's difficult to get into his streams because there's like, several years of of a philosophical or political development, I suppose. But that's just going to be the barrier to entry for this kind of thing. You're going to have to care, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree. It's there's two things. It's sort of the barrier to entry, and it's the other part of like the censorship in these on YouTube and a lot of these streaming channels. Is that we really kind of have to stick to this very highbrow, detailed, boring kind of almost documentary style filmmaking. But
Yeah,
with
sure. I
academic,
mean, we could probably make weekly shows about reacting to whatever new crazy thing is going on and swearing a lot, but or
it's
or
like
saying gamer words, and but we would probably be taken down. So
it's like the Adam and Sitch, but more spicy.
yes,
Something like that.
There's more crying about Ape Tor in the chat. I think we should keep going before Vingo.
Yeah, change the setting.
Gets lost in his gets lost in his depression. Okay. Hello, everyone. I see some people saying hello. I read all the chats you're sending, so if you have any questions, just post them as we go. If they're relevant, I will bring them up to Luddick or myself, or I will favorite them, which is a feature that I discovered, and then I can pull them back up when we get to the end of the presentation. We also talked about we might do a little bit of current events if we get any time after the presentation here.
Yeah, we did schedule actually a little bit of time in the presentation to go through some current stuff.
Yes. Okay, so can I pull up the presentation here? There we go. So you've decided to call this the Norwegian alt media and metapolitics, and how do we get it right? And I suspected that it's a bit of a wordplay in terms of how we're going to get it correct and how we're going to get it drifting rightwards.
That is smarter. You're smarter than me already. I'm just doing like
this is one of the
do bad translations. It's unintentionally.
Oh, okay.
Smart, I guess.
It was the curtains were actually just blue moment. The joke about your English or your language teacher asking you about why the author decided to paint the curtains blue, or describe the curtains as blue. What does that say about the author? No, the curtains were just blue.
Yep.
Anyway, let's get into it. You wanted to start with catching up on current events.
Actually, yeah, I thought we would do this one. We would do this one first, just to have a little bit of fun with this. So I included this this picture here that I actually took from a local grocery store. And as you can see, they sort of deployed like the full apparatus here for the international viewers. So it's like in the down right corner here, you could say it basically says "Help Ukraine." And they have
this
like a complete
in
function.
The grocery stores.
Yes, yeah. This is in a grocery store. You're going to self-checkout lane with the machine, and you just you put the barcodes in the scanner, and this is what you get basically. It just prompts you to help Ukraine. It's just immediate like cash transfer. So yes. I mean, I'm seeing it like as well in the picture on the top left here. That's actually from a bank. That the first page that you get to in the bank as well is that they try to funnel you into some place where you put more money into some sort of pro-Ukrainian charity.
I'm not entirely confident in saying this, but it sort of took me a little bit by surprise, because I feel like Ukraine is the first issue in Norway where you really feel the sort of the corporate political thing starting to take hold. I mean, probably because it's an easy one to support, of course. I'm sure there have been other issues where you could see it more clearly, but usually I feel like we have been shielded from a lot of the things like that. Corporations telling you how to vote, basically.
It was fun while it lasted, you can say.
Yes, we had a good run, but
we had a good run.
Unfortunately.
I mean, the reason I included like the photo down here in the left corner, for those of you who are not Norwegian, as you see on the left here, it's Bjorn Darley, who is he's the head of like the Red Party, the sort of communism light. It's like the sort of Red Election Alliance, and then on the right here you have Audun Lysbakken, I think, who's the head of the Socialist Left. And
again, if you want to know more about those parties, you can head over to the Norwegian Political Overview stream after this one, of course.
The reason that these two are interesting, normally I don't pay that much attention to them, but I've sort of noticed that with this sort of Ukraine thing is that they've been kind of bullied almost in the media. I don't know if you noticed this, Walrus.
They've
been bullied in the media. And this is kind of unexpected because they usually get a lot of space to come with these more kind of socialist government spending type talking points, feminism talking points, and so on. But these parties are basically anti-NATO. They're anti-NATO,
that's
and they're
usually
sort
when
of
they
anti-EU.
Get into trouble.
So they've been. I've basically seen a bunch of articles in different media that it has the same tone as, oh well, they need to seriously rethink, their position on NATO and EU membership. But you can sort of see the kind of consensus, or the cathedral that's trying to just kind of cram the entire political spectrum into one opinion here. It's a very powerful sort of totalitarian display, where you see like the few things that actually sets these Norwegian parties apart from each other. Like the media is just trying to squeeze every party into sort of the same consensus, basically. So if you like in the future, every party is just going to be super pro NATO, pro EU, and if you're not that, then you're just going to get browbeat.
Yes, the Overton window is certainly has been shrinking for a long time, and the socialists and the leftists have usually been able to get away with talking about socialist talking points in terms of taxes and sharing gibs, etc. Mostly because we're in that sense a socialist nation and have a lot of people working for the government, either directly or indirectly, depending on which one you look at. It might be as high as 40-50% working more or less directly for the government. And and so it's hard to attack them unless they try to bustle about EU or NATO or anything like that. Then they usually get pounced.
But yeah, I mean, in the Norwegian political class and in the sort of top bourgeois class in Norway, they've always been pro EU, and they've done pretty much every kind of tactic in terms of salami slicing and political trickery to just push us further in that direction, even though it's not a majority position. But like with this Ukraine stuff, they really have probably the strongest card that I think they've ever had. At really any point in like since the World War II.
Yes. And I see Nordanon in the chat says that if the media in this country were to be believed, Sweden and Finland are on the verge of joining NATO right now. And Russia is one day away from just collapsing, apparently.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I'm seeing that it's
also
interesting.
Send more guns, please.
Send more guns. No, but I'm seeing that after reading this book on Reset and Helge Lur, also I see, I notice names in the newspaper that I didn't used to, like the NUPI, that's sort of like the Norwegian Foreign Policy Institute. He talks a lot about them, but like they're some of the main people who are coming out, like the quote unquote experts that say that Russia is going to collapse in like 2 days.
Yes.
So we'll get it. I mean, Luros has a lot to say on them as well.
Yeah, we can get into it as we go.
But just like before we move on, you mentioned something to me about like how certain people in your life have been talking about the Ukraine and like what's in your sphere? What's like the normie take on the Ukraine-Russia situation?
In my sphere, like normie wise, that would be the people I meet at work and the people I was talking to you about, the midwifery of the lunch table. Sorry. And well, it's all of these things. It's the latest. So I joke it's the latest software development. The software update from some of the more midwit papers, taken at face value, and then sort of just regurgitated, and then you can just add a couple of quips about, oh, well, but imagine if Trump was president now, how crazy that would have been, har, etc., right? And then we can all style ourselves as, smart people.
Yeah, the Trump card is still good, I guess.
It still works really well. And it's all these things about, Russia is about to fall over, Putin is a madman, without any respect for any of the historical contexts or any attempt at understanding geopolitics. And I saw Bell Curve say that Putin doesn't care about anyone in the West, and I agree insofar as he probably, it seems like Russia, and I try to use the word Russia because as much of a powerful man Putin is, to some extent the Russian apparatus is behind him on this move. It seems that Russia as an entity is trying to create an alternative, and I don't necessarily want us to live under Russia or anything like that. I'm not saying it's a better alternative than what we have now, but it's a good learning opportunity. And it's a good way to maybe try to talk to people, or if family members suddenly start questioning why all of these articles seem to be proven wrong within 6 hours of being posted, why this is happening. But other than that, I'll continue praying that the war doesn't end up on our doorstep, and try to see if we can become more robust in terms of economic self-sufficiency in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want the war to end up at my doorstep either, but I'm not dying for the EU. I'm not going to die for this this Norwegian regime either, probably. So I'm just going to be in whatever spaces that are safe. And whoever winds up on top, I think I'll just try to continue as before. It would probably be nice to have like this kind of patriotic death. I just don't feel like it's possible in this current in the current situation. As far as my life, like with the normies that I deal with, I mentioned to you that I feel like this kind of transition that the media has done now, it feels to me almost like watching a hypnosis show. I don't know if you remember them. I used to watch them when I was younger on TV, where they would bring people on stage and they would just sit in a chair and they would like wave this sort of pendulum in front of them and try to whisper things in their ear. And when I snap my fingers, you become a chicken. And then he snaps their finger and then they go cluck around and they snap their finger again and then just go back to being themselves. Like the way that I've seen like these sort of 50-plus-year-old women transform from like this kind of agoraphobia, scared of bacteria. Like it's a human right for me not to be, not to be in touch with bacteria, and everybody has to wear a mask every, and if it saves just one lives, like people should live to 120 years old and so on. And they've gone from that to basically being like Clint Eastwood or something. Like they think they're like the most, we need to kill Putin immediately.
Yes.
It's they've sort of morphed into this caricature of Americans, really, like from the Norwegian perspective. Like you have this kind of ignorant, mid like Rust Belt southern
that's
states
a strange
American
thing. In a sense, it's like the caricature of the Southern American in 2001 talking about the damn Arabs. We got to go teach them,
They hate us for our freedoms.
Yeah,
They
right.
hate us for our freedoms, and they were mocked like in Norway. Oh, this is really stupid and unsophisticated. But you look at the normie attitude they have towards Russia. It's basically they hate us for our inclusion, and it's basically it's really the same thing. They're not interested in getting into details or some sort of adult, more complex view of how this works. There's like this person's evil and we're the good guys and we're just gonna blow the shit out of them.
Right.
Very interesting to see.
It's interesting considering, hypocrisy isn't anything new for us, but it's interesting that we should condemn Russia for doing something or that these people should condemn Russia for doing something that they have supported tacitly for 20 years in the Middle East, basically.
Yes.
And that they fail to sort of, what's the Christian quote about the wood in your own eye, etc.
Yes.
Before you criticize, or
try to remove don't care about the speck in your brother's eye before you remove like the pole in your own eye.
That's the one. Yes,
that's the quote there. And I mean, of course, you can say that. Oh, wow, hypocrisy, but it just seems like these people have so little self-awareness in that sense.
Exactly, that's my point. It's just such a blatant example, and the fact that they fail to see it in themselves sort of tells me all I need to know.
Yeah, I mean, in some sense, I think the new left was right in that people are just, okay, you can just kind of form people into being whatever you want. I mean, maybe not in the way they think, but in some sense, you can really see the media apparatus flexing their muscles in this one. I don't have the link right now, but there's this video on YouTube that is like this old 1950s, I think it was made in the 1960s type of, it's not a propaganda video, but it's like this very pro-American cartoon that explains how the stock market works to like a sort of average Joe person or to a child.
Oh, yeah.
And they talk about, well, we've built, you can invest in America's future and we're building the machinery that can be that in wartime can be converted to create bombs and airplanes. So they talk about, well, you're going to invest in manufacturing, and if we get into war, we can just turn these things into basically war factories or just bomb factories. And that's sort of what I see now, like with the economy. It's the same thing that's happening. It's just that the economy is different. It's more of like this sort of service yes. economy where the product is software or the product is media, and they're just turning that into like full war mode now, and we're seeing like the full power that you have with this stuff.
Certainly. Yeah, it's certainly an opportunity for for awakening for a lot of people, I think, but we can maybe talk more about that later when we get into
nothing more to add on this one now.
Sorry if I'm muting a little bit. I still have a slight cough every now and then.
Yeah, I had the same problem, maybe like almost like 2 or 3 weeks after. I mean, I wasn't sick for very long, but it does stay in the system for
lingers.
For a while.
It does. Yeah. Not sure if it's worth heavy lockdowns for, but that's another discussion.
Probably not.
Okay. So here you have something about the left-wing army versus the right-wing army.
So we can just continue along this kind of war metaphor. I mean, this picture it didn't illustrate completely what I wanted, but it's just a kind of it is a nice illustration. Fits nicely with the theme. The point here is that, I mean, for most people watching, I assume they have what I would like to call like dissident right literacy. So some of this stuff is going to be redundant. But after, when that warning is out of the way, I like, when I talk about politics and I talk about the left versus the right, I'd like to compare them in terms of two armies that are fighting each other, where the left army is the sort of left-wing army. I mean, of course, I think a lot of left-wingers would object to me using that term. Like if you get someone like some Richard Wolff, some sort of tanky, they would say, like the media right now, it's not left-wing, but we'll just stick with it for this metaphor.
Yeah.
So, like, you have two armies here, where you have the right-wing army that is really the most man-strong army. Like, that's where it has the most men, it has the most will, and the probably like the better health, the stronger people. And then you have the left-wing army that is continually beating them. And why are they beating them? Because they have better propaganda, they have better logistics, they have better strategy, and like really everything
Usually
else.
support of the institutions too, I'll say.
Well, the institutions is kind of the logistics, like that's the war technology.
That's
that is the metaphor. Is that these logistics that they have is basically the institutions. It's like having these kind of shelters and having railways, for instance, that can sort of transport parts and things. So they're always beating the right-wing army, because the only thing the right-wing army is capable of doing is basically they send out a general to the infantry and they try to rile up the infantry and say, this time we're going to get them. They're endangering our freedoms and they're threatening our blood and soil and whatever. And we need to, this time we really need to rile up and take all your strength. And it's like this William Wallace type stuff. And they get riled up, they run into enemy fire and they get beaten again. And this happens over and over and over again. And there's never any attempt of the right-wing army to actually try to regroup and think about, okay, maybe we should try to upgrade a little bit. Like maybe we should try something else. They just go back to, well, it's the next election the people are gonna be so tired of the left-wing army that we're gonna rile up the people again and bring a new army that's just gonna get slaughtered like the same other ones. So that's sort of the metaphor that I'm trying to go with here. And when we talk about metapolitics, and like the metapolitics is really everything but the men fighting. It's all of the support systems. And I mean, in a broad sense, it's, the word meta comes from like the word beyond or sort of above. So it's about trying to think about everything that affects politics. That's not politics directly.
Not the day-to-day debates, etc. Yeah.
Yes. So you could go look at the next slide. So I have a video here. I have a link here just to, we could play the video here. So I did take out a little clip of this video where you have Helge Lurås. We'll get back to him later, who's interviewing Jon Helgheim from the Norwegian Progress Party. I mean, it's for those who are not in the know, they're not progressives. They're basically considered within the Overton window. They're like the most far right party in Norway. And this is just to illustrate like the complete either like willing ignorance that these people have toward it, or the sort of complete lack of intelligence they have in terms of how this political machine functions. So I mean, I put the subtitles on myself for the international viewers, so you can just play the video.
All right, here we go.
Så dere jobber opplysningsmessig I forhold til de andre stortingsrepresentantene? Det sånn dere tenker dere at dere skal få gjennomslag? Men også opp mot den store lobbyvirksomheten som jobber for en høy innvandring. Og dem det mange av. Og de påvirker Stortinget. Kanskje mer enn det FRP klarer. Sånn at vi jobber med å opplyse rundt på flere forskjellige nivåer I samfunnet, både på Stortinget, men også opp mot de organisasjonene og aktivistene vi stadig debatterer med. Men de jo I veldig stor grad statsfinansiert, statsstøtte aktivister som dere jobber imot, og dere jo sittet I noen regjering I snart 5 år. De fortsetter å få penger på budsjettet, ikke det et paradoks? Vi har noen kriterier for at organisasjoner skal få penger, og det sånn et demokrati fungerer. Man skal ikke gi ut penger etter hva slags politiske meninger det vel de facto det som skjer, det ikke det? Man skal ikke gi ut penger etter de meningene disse organisasjonene har. De oppfyller noen kriterier og får det, men vi kan like godt jobbe for å opplyse de om hvordan ting men det viktigste jobben jo å opplyse velgerne om hva de må stemme på, for det velgerne som til syvende og sist bestemmer, og jeg synes det rart at ved forrige valg så var det innvandring som var det viktigste tema for flest velgere. Men I forhold til dette med at de oppfyller visse kriterier, altså de kriteriene blir jo satt politisk, som igjen da disse organisasjonene kvalifiserer til og får da støtte. Det jo en betydelig, I hvert fall sånn som vi ser det I Resett, en betydelig nærmest industri av organisasjoner, NGOer som lever av å kritisere streng innvandringspolitikk. Ja da, det det. Jeg overrasket over at det finnes nesten ingen organisasjoner som jobber for virkelige flyktninger, de som virkelig har det vondt og fælt. De aller fleste organisasjonene, de jobber for rettighetene til grunnløse asylsøkere i Norge, i veldig stor grad.
Og de får penger fra det offentlige for å jobbe for det.
Ja, altså det er mange organisasjoner som driver med veldig mye rart i Norge, som får offentlig støtte, fordi kriteriene er sånn. Jeg tror ikke løsningen er å angripe de støtteordningene. Man kommer ikke veldig langt med det. Vi har tatt fra statsstøtte til...
Ja, gjør man ikke egentlig det? Altså, det er vel ikke noe umulighet. Dette er jo, hva skal jeg si, skatteinntekter som brukes og fordeles da til politiske prosjekter som dere i utgangspunktet er imot.
Og jeg tror vi er på vei inn på et spor som ikke er bra, hvis vi skal gå og fjerne statsstøtte til organisasjoner vi ikke er enige med. Så det er ikke FrPs politikk. Vi jobber med opplysning, vi har gjerne debattene, og vi står veldig godt for den politikken vi står for, som de kritiserer.
All right. That's a bit of a black pill there from Ludwig. I keep getting riled up at him saying that taking a political stance against organizations that are explicitly against what you stand for or are working explicitly to tell your children that you are a bad person, that would be moving to a bad place. I mean, where do you think we are now?
Yeah, we can't do that. Like, that's beneath us, right? We're like the honorable people in this fight here. So we're not going to make any metapolitical moves or make any attempt to shut down people who actually affect policy. He just goes back to this, well, we're going to show up in debates.
Yes, essentially. We can
on the
leftist enough that
we're just gonna keep dunking.
Yeah.
If you go to the next slide here, I'm just going to trash this guy a little bit. At first, I didn't want to. I mean, I'm trying to keep this as professional as possible, but okay. Well, is he right here? We're just gonna disprove his point immediately. Are you familiar with the Human Rights Service, Walrus?
Vaguely. So why don't you...
you can open up the Wikipedia page and I'll try to explain what it is. So the Human Rights Service, you don't want to get it mixed up with the Human Rights Watch, because that's something completely different. The Human Rights Service is what you call like the closest thing in Norway you have to a right-wing NGO. It's like a think tank made by two Islamophobic lesbians. And that's it. Like, I mean, they will bring these people out on occasion, but they I mean, we're talking about if an organization is doing harm or good. Like, to me, it just seems like they're basically just doing harm because they're not able to present themselves very optically. And the only idea they're able to produce is that Islam is bad because it's not progressive. Like, that is the essence of it. So it's I mean, of course, they're considered to be like the Progress Party or like the Far Right's Party's main think tank. But the interesting thing is that they have gotten funding. They have actually made decent, they've gotten a decent amount of money. And like, I think that assuming, you look at, if you some website like prof.no, you could look at their accounting and you can see how much revenue they've gotten year on year. And it's actually pretty good. It's if they have like 3 people working for them, they could take out a pretty good salary, and it seems like they have. So it's a good racket, and they have just like this website where they produce this stuff for they have one idea, is that Islam is bad. Islam is bad because of women's rights. Islam is bad because of gays, and Islam is bad because it doesn't work with like liberal democracy.
Counter jihad, basically.
Yeah, counter jihad. Like, that's the. I mean, there's only so much you can say about it. In my view, it's not a very exciting position. But like in Norway, the way that the Overton window and the political landscape is structured from the media top down and in the head of like a Norwegian normie, this is basically like, this is as right wing as you can get. like the right-wing bad guy is like this kind of like liberal conservative, or like this classic liberal person who is counter jihad. That's
The
the
HRS has
bogeyman.
been described as a bridge between right-wing radicals and civil society, according to a professor. She sounds
Yes.
Swedish. But the link is red, so it doesn't go anywhere.
Not unlikely, but it's like they, they have actually promoted. It says further down there that they've been promoting Fjordman, and they got in some trouble with that, like with the 22nd July and the Breivik shootings.
Oh yes,
and so on. So, but like this is not. I don't actually think that this is because they are generally right wing. I don't want to be mean here, but I generally think that these people who are running it are just not smart enough to understand that they're actually promoting people who are like really spicy. You know, they just take anything they can find that's like anti-Islam, and they find a lot of blogs.
I think it's a little bit of, looking at it from the outside here, it seems like a little bit of bio-Leninism at work, essentially, that incompetency is probably the answer here in terms of, you take anything you can get, because probably the more stuff you have going on, the more money you're going to get from the government. So you don't really care about what you're doing as long as you're doing something.
But I don't I'm talking about like this as a money racket. I don't doubt that these two women, like Rita Karlsson and Hege Storhag, I don't think they're insincere. I like, when I listen to them, I genuinely believe that they are convinced of what they're doing.
Oh yeah, certainly, but
they believe in it.
At the end of the day, they're an NGO, and an NGO needs money. And how do you get money? Well, you go to the government, and no organization ever asked for a decrease in budget because they didn't know how to spend the money.
Nope, that's very well put. So you could go back to the slide again, because there's another link there. Because you see, like in the second on the second link here, in 2001, last year, they were defunded. Interesting, huh? It's like they've been getting funding, I think, for almost like 12 years, continuously every year, and they've been getting more and more funding. And now, under the previous conservative government, it was slashed. And it was slashed for political reasons, because the people there didn't like their opinions. It's really that simple. So, like, when this guy is in the Progress Party, and like the parties that they're in coalition with are slashing NGOs that they don't like blatantly, they're doing it.
And then this guy's sitting here saying, "Well, we probably shouldn't do that because that would leave a bad taste in my mouth."
We can't do that because we have, like, for every one right-wing NGO, we have like 500 left-wing NGOs, and we can't. It's not about criteria. We can't do anything about it. It's I don't know what to say. Like L plus ratio plus no coalition government plus immigration. That's sort of that's my view on that guy. It's just I'm sorry. Like, I don't want to be this mean. I don't intend for this to be like this kind of attack show, but it's frustrating too. Yeah.
And we're probably going to get into the guy who was interviewing him as well. But this guy's view is basically, it's the default white man view that we'd all like to have, but because we've been fucking up for like 70 years, we're starting to see consequences that won't allow us to live like that anymore.
No. We can't afford it. We don't live.
I would like to live in the glorious libertarian sort of, it's a nice democracy and everything works out and we're all happy, but that's just not realistic. And the groundwork for that being realistic is so far gone that we're basically going to have to start over.
Yes, I mean the other side has been running a war. Basically, they've just thrown out all kinds of ideas of truth and. Really any type of ideas of honor or anything. They've taken every inch they can get for years, like for 70 years.
The high road on this isn't an option anymore.
Sorry, but that's not the game we're playing anymore. Like, just look around you. It's not what it used to be. I'm sorry, but I think we can move on from this guy and take a look at some of the other concepts here. So
this one's good.
I made a bit of a colorful graphic, and there's many ways that you could slice up this idea of metapolitics and what is a metapolitical institution. I mean, sociologically, an institution is just repeated behavior that has some kind of utility for society. And like, I just put it in, like, you can divide this up into different ways. I just put it in boxes where you have basically, okay, in the center here, like you have the actual, what I think of as like, this is politics, like the actual people who make the laws, who run the bureaucracy, who are like the judges who make these judgments, the people who decide who gets money and who doesn't get money, and like who do we punish and who do we reward. And well, what affects it? So I put all these arrows there, and they have like one head at each end, meaning that it's reciprocal, like it's reciprocal causality. They affect each other. So I mean, you can affect the politics with laws, and the public can affect politics, and so on. But like, I mean, here you just have the entire enchilada of like, you have the NGOs with their think tanks, the youth organizations, the advocacy groups. I mean, that's a very big bubble. So the bubbles don't have a size that's really proportional to the impact they have. But you have mass media, the public education, culture and religion I put there, not as like, they aren't necessarily organizations, but these are just these kind of leftovers from history, and like these sort of unspoken things that we let's say, like
I really liked this when I saw you saw this you sent it to me a couple of days ago, I think.
Yes.
And because it really helps to drive home the the public sphere here is usually the classical or the normie view of what is the democracy. Well, you vote, and there's polling, and you can voice your opinion if you're mad, and then you can talk
Stern
to your
letter.
representative. Yeah. And those are certainly ways of affecting politics, as in the big gray box or circle. But there's also 4 or 5 others that have varying forms of lesser or larger impact than the one that you think you have.
Yes, and I mean, you have to start, if you were to divide up these by like left versus right, and who has actually more influence here, like if we're playing Risk or something, and who controls the pieces of land, if like each of these boxes or each of these bubbles are a piece of land, then I think, yeah, the what we would call the left is basically they control the NGO, they control like the media here, they control most of the public education, and now they're also taking the private sector, and they're starting to take culture and religion. So maybe in the 80s, they talk about, say, the American 80s, they would say that, okay, the public is then maybe majority is conservative, and you have the private sector as well that is there's still the Coca-Cola with the patriotism, and there's a little bit in the media in terms of like cinema that's running kind of this patriotic stuff. But if you look at the NGOs and education, they had those two, and now they've just they're taking each of these boxes for themselves, and we're basically just left with the populism. That's like this have a large part of the public that's just unhappy with the box in the middle, because all these other boxes are doing the opposite of what they want, and they can't figure out why.
Which is why I think usually whenever there's populist movements, they usually get hammered very hard, because that's the remaining true right wing, or like the only remaining right wing sort of power base looking at this map. So whenever that crops up, everyone else sort of turns their attention on them, because they're the only like beacon around for right wing movements, and hammer them.
Yep. So yeah, I don't have anything else to add to this one. You could skip to the next slide just for effect here.
Just looking through it again, trying to see if there's any. I will say that maybe the only other one that might be at least 50-50 is the private sector on the right here. In Norway specifically, I can't say for other countries. But I noticed that, talking to people in the private sector, depending on where you're at, of course, in the private sector, but that's usually where you find a lot more, normal people, I suppose, people who naturally fall on the right, who might be able to see what's going on, but sort of decide that, well, this is above my pay grade.
Taking the easy way out here. And I mean, that's what we're going to see, look at later in the presentation, is that, if you are kind of like a white male with above average IQ, then you could get a good job in the private sector, and you can use that money to shield yourself to a certain degree. And I think that has been sort of a buffer for the system, because it stops them from directly interacting with
It's
these
a
other
form of
institutions.
containment, certainly.
Yes.
All right, next one.
So this is just for fun, like what I call like the conservative bubble. I mean, the way, if you were to have have it explained to you by someone on like this mainstream conservative like talk radio, these kind of political parties, how does politics work? Well, it's a one-way arrow, the public vote, and then that changes the politicians, and that's it. And that's kind of their worldview, and the rest is Cthulhu. Basically, that's sort of what I thought about here.
Yeah, we keep doing this, but somehow everything keeps getting more left wing.
Yep. So you can't see the other things. It's like you just sort of lack senses, and then so you always lose. You're basically blind and deaf, and I mean the whole enchilada. So if you go to the next slide, we could.
It's a little bit the stream I did alone a couple of months ago now on the failures of conservatives and libertarians. I had pretty much this as the biggest conservative failure, in that you either explicitly or implicitly become part of the system and you let it corrupt you because you can't see any other way out, because your frame is too small.
Yes. So I wanted to let's see, just include this one here. It's a bit of a kind of hacked in graphic, but to especially like reading some literature I have now, I've been thinking about like the Norwegian Overton window. I mean, what is actually within acceptable discourse? So for the foreigners watching here, the sort of quirks in the system, if you're from like an American background, they usually think about the red as like that's the Republicans, and the red is to the right, and then the blue team is then on the left. But in Scandinavian countries or the European models, it's usually the opposite. Like they consider the left as the red, because the red is like the Marxist color. The reds, and the blues are on the right. And in the understanding here, it's like this typical blue direction is like the liberal direction, and the red direction is the socialist direction. And within like the Overton window of these sort of acceptable like blue opinions you have, like I put there, they love Israel, loves my Israel, loves my NATO, love the masks. And if you go more to the right here, what's sort of considered like you have the sour face there with Islam. So that's the Islamophobia. That's like, it is within the discourse, you can say, but it's not.
Yes.
It is considered like sort of ridiculous or radical. You're kind of on the fringes there, my dude. I mean, people with opinions like mine or of the walrus, we're sort of like beyond the arrow. It is like just almost like alien technology, I think, for a normie to try to understand.
I will say though that in the same way, and I saw some chats about that earlier as well. In a strange way, a unironic communist is also outside of this.
Yes,
but that's sort of the strange. Sometimes the communists and the fascists agree on the problem, but not the solution situation, I think.
Yeah, I mean, especially now, we both follow and we sort of circle around this academic agent sphere, and he's been talking about clearing them out as the negative vision.
And in a sense, that's the Marxist view as well.
Yeah, that is also the Marxist view. So in terms of that kind of coalition, they are a part. Like the Tanky is going to be a part of that coalition.
Certainly.
And when I think about like the friend-enemy distinction and getting like a clear view of the friend-enemy distinction, I don't know if this is your opinion, but my observation is that a lot of these sort of ex-Marxists who have just sort of gone right-wing, they're the people who seem to have like the clearest understanding of the friend-enemy. Because I think it gets confusing for a lot of people who just always have this kind of right-leaning opinions, and they fall into a lot of traps.
Yes, it's something about It's a little bit. I think it also has something to do because every time you find right-wing movements, they tend to pick up a lot of let's call them free thinkers along the way that optically doesn't do us any favors. You get the hippies with the anti-vaxxers because somehow, once you break through, you're free, basically. So you get strange bedfellows. Let's just put it like that.
You get strange bedfellows, but I mean, you have certain groups that are just, people who are very like hard right wing, and they've always been right wing. I'll give you two examples. Say the first one is like the traditionalist or the fundamentalist Christian. That would be is that they're going to be super hard on, like, they know their Bible, they know the Bible inside and out. They're usually quite well read, and their worldview is going to be basically, they're going to agree with, degeneracy is bad. They're very good on tradition. They're good on like gender roles. They're sort of anti like counter jihad or whatever.
Yep.
But then we'd run into I loves my Israel. I loves my Israel. I love we're all one flesh under God or whatever. So they're going to be into miscegenation most likely. I'm sorry, I don't want to make that sound too bad, but you can take the example of Fred Phelps. Do you know who that is?
Yes, but I'll just real quickly. I've met people like that, so
Yes.
I know very well what you're talking about. They're exceptionally smart people, but then they also come with this sort of baggage that you don't necessarily even need. Your analysis was complete. Why did you have to tack on all these other things? Just because you're part of that group, you have to be pro-Israel. That's not how it works.
No, it's the pro-Israel. I mean, I like to use Fred Phelps as the best example. I mean, he was like the sort of patriarch of the Westboro Baptist Church, and I'm not going to sit and say that, it's a homophobia, it's not Christ-like. That's not my point. I think it's sort of an unknown fact about the people in that sort of church community is that he is a lawyer. Most of those the people in that family are educated as lawyers, so they're very smart. They know their laws. But before he became like this sort of homophobic bogeyman, Fred Phelps was actually a civil rights lawyer who helped overturn a lot of these sort of old kind of like Jim Crow type style things and to push in this sort of forced integration that you saw in the 60s and 70s in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's just, him being a good Christian, first principles, good Christian. So he helped the progressives. He helped the progressive movement integrate society. And that was all well and good. He got all these rednecks or whatever, like all these prejudiced Southern people. And then after he's done that, they used the same sort of story, the same narrative that he used and they used to kind of end segregation and to start this sort of forced integration process. They used that same framework to get to create homosexual acceptance, which now that's against his first principles. So he starts running around with these science like God hates fags and all that sort of stuff, and then they turn him into the bogeyman. So first they help him, like he helps the progressives through following his own first principles. He helps the progressives, and then when he doesn't agree with them anymore, then they turn him into like this sort of bogeyman that helps them in another way. Yeah. So that's the sort of unfortunate fate that I see with some of these fundamentalist Christians, that they end up just inevitably helping the other side, and they have like, I don't know if it's something to do with the way the faith is structured, but they have usually a poor understanding of the friend-enemy distinction. That's just my at least from that perspective.
This is above my pay grade, but this seems to be a not every denomination has this phenomenon. So there might be something with either Catholicism or Protestantism and the way these organizations have been sort of morphed over the years. That
I think with Protestants and evangelicals, I think they're the most susceptible to this kind of subversion.
Yes.
But then you can have just to balance this out, you can have on the other side someone who's like a hardcore nationalist. There's sort of like ethnic nationalist. And they just have like this complete sort of almost totalitarian, authoritarian political look, and where like you see with Morgoth, these people is like, oh yeah, I love COVID lockdowns because the government is based, and now they're using force, and this is great.
It's
Like
the
they fall into the other trap.
Richard Spencer
yes.
shoehorn moment, yeah.
Where they get confused on these on a lot of these other issues because they're very locked into this kind of racial nationalist frame. So like when you have people like Steigon, like these sort of Marxists that kind of go like, say, like James Burnham, who wrote the Machiavellians and the Managerial Revolution, who was like a previous Trotskyite who went to become kind of more right-wing conservative. They have just like in my views, almost a perfect sort of friend-enemy understanding. Because they're not shackled to all of this baggage, as you said.
Exactly, they're free to sort of believe their lying eyes. So so that's how you end up with that pipeline, so to speak.
Yes. I don't have anything else on that. Do you have anything as far as like the Norwegian Overton window that you think I missed here?
I'm trying to think. I don't think so. I think you covered a lot of it very well. There's the usual stuff about sort of economic policy, but I don't think that's very interesting to what we're talking about.
No, it is quite boring, but typically, I mean, you get broad agreement. There's just, you go along the blue axis, they want less taxes, and the red axis, they usually want more taxes, but they end up in some kind of, like within the center, that's considered, that they consider reasonable, which just happens to coincide with like the minimal amount of taxes they can have before the billionaires leave.
Yeah.
It's just a coincidence that's usually where they end up. So yeah, I mean, we talked previously on this news stream. This was like the reset, or it's two T's. It's not like I haven't misspelled it. Like the domain, and this news network is actually called Reset with two T's. It's like Helge Lurås, a quite recent news network. So I've been reading a book currently. Yeah, now we're in on it. So here it is. To be honest, I'm not very impressed with his newspaper, and I don't say that to try to antagonize or anything, but I think he would agree with me. I heard he had a recent podcast where he talked about how he wanted to sort of try to up the quality of some of these articles and some of the content they're putting out. And reading the book on the creation of this news network, I understand it, because they are strapped for cash, basically. They've been running this newspaper on a shoestring budget. I'm not kidding. I had no idea it was like this bad when I read the book, but it's like just trying to acquire capital to get the manpower to run a sort of consistent, like this kind of right-leaning, right-wing dissident type of newspaper. The way this
real
is,
quick, because if I remember correctly, every newspaper in Norway are getting Gibbs, aren't they?
Not this one.
Not this one. Okay.
Not this one. No, that's what we talked about. I mean, they're not giving. Like we go back to Jon's his analysis. Oh well, it's just the criteria. It's just how that works. Well, the criteria is political, and they don't give money.
Awfully convenient.
Yeah. I mean, you have Marxist newspapers in Norway getting like 10 million Norwegian kroners every year in subsidies and tax breaks. But if you try to do something like this, they're not going to give you anything. And I'm going to go through that in more detail later in the presentation, where they try to get money and how like they were just routinely denied by every free speech quote unquote institution that that where they try to ask to get help.
Right.
So we can just keep paging. Yep. So here we have the man himself on the right, Helge Lurås, and that's the sort of book that I got my hands on previous to this. So it's sort of, I wasn't that interested in Reset prior to this. If you hear me in the if you go back to the media stream, I am a little bit dismissive of this newspaper, and I mean, if you just look at it at face value, if you are someone like me who's not that familiar with it and just take a look at it, and it's kind of like well. I guess
I have
it's
been as
good,
well,
but
because I've
yeah.
scrolled through it a couple of times, with a couple of weeks break, and it didn't impress me, and then eventually you stop.
Yeah, it is. But the background history of this stuff is a lot more impressive. And I mean, if you learn sort of how this got started and what they've been able to do or not do within a very sort of short time frame, the story is actually very different. So I'm just going to go through the bullet points here. They founded this in 2017, so it's actually a very new news organization compared to, say, like Document.no. I think it's been around for like 15 years plus. So it's a lot younger. They do basically, like you see, the news, sports news. They'll do opinion columns. They're a lot more, let's just say, liberal with publishing stuff that won't be published other places. Like you can write this sort of anonymous article to the newspaper that maybe like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you could get it published on some like VG.no, Aftenposten, these larger news sites, but they've gotten a lot more stringent about their standards.
Yes.
But it's a little bit easier to get it through on this website.
That's also one of the things that I've noticed with Reset is, you get the good with the bad when the barrier to entry is low.
The barrier to entry is low, and we'll get into that as well. It's like the content quality suffers. And it's the same thing with, like, they allow comments on all of their articles and all of their and the videos and everything they put out. And that's also something that makes the quality suffer quite a bit. But according to their own numbers, they actually have a large user base. So if you have like, I mean, it's Norway is not that big. So you have a population of about 5 million people, but they claim to have about 600,000 unique readers per month. And if you click at the compare link, you can sort of see, like, with the numbers of some of the established news media here, is that you have like VG, they have the most traffic. I suspect some of it is just people checking their IP, like they want to check if the internet works. That's like one of the jokes in Norway, because they have like the shortest domain name. It's just 2 letters, vg.no. And if you want to go in the console and check if you have internet access, that's the one. That's the
one you go to.
You're testing against. So, but joking aside, it's a very established brand. Then Dagbladet and Aftenposten, I mean, they are very similar. They employ a lot of the same stuff. Aftenposten is considered to be a bit more of like this bourgeois, midwit newspaper.
Yes, it certainly is.
So, but I mean, with these numbers, they are like, number 4, compared to these other ones. So it's actually, they have a lot of viewers, of a lot of engagement on that on the Reset website, and that's kind of a big deal.
Yes, and I remember when this was started, because this was in 2017. So that the Trump derangement syndrome was at a peak then, and Reset was like a dangerous boogeyman, because it was going to give rise to the same kind of voices here in Norway. I remember.
Yeah, I mean, Helge Lurås was one of the first people to actually predict that Trump was going to win. And he was one of the people who actually had some clout. So he was in the newspaper saying that, Trump is probably going to win the election, and that's a good thing, right? Not a very popular opinion. And for him, that was a huge gamble. It's easy for some people like us to just sit and say, Trump is going to win. But like this guy actually had a
random internet stream. But yeah, this guy was he's a former military man, and he has a political career, so he was pretty much staking his name on this.
He was sort of writing. He worked as like a foreign policy advisor right after being in the army, being stationed out, and so he actually had written a lot of articles, and he had clout. Like, he was sort of considered an expert on the sort of like Yugoslavia and Afghanistan, things like that. And when he comes out and says that Trump should probably win, like, he has a lot of connections, and he's really staking his name on that, and and it turned out to be like a big win for him. And I'll go into that more later, but he that made it, he was picked up by a lot of other people to do more analysis, But yeah, it's with this guy. He seems to he's made a lot of enemies. Let's just put it that way. And it's not just because of his political opinions, but he has a bit more of that kind of contrarian type, I would just say like this kind of contrarian alpha male type.
Yeah, he
instinct.
presents himself in
Yeah.
a very like matter-of-factly, I know what I'm talking about way, and that's something I like about him. Since you told me about this book, I've been looking into a lot of interviews with him or interviews he does, and like the clip we played earlier, his sort of his delivery is very no nonsense and confrontational at times.
Yes.
Which is actually quite unusual.
He's not afraid of confrontation, and like in Norway, especially in like Norwegian government bureaucracies, to come in with that kind of an attitude. I mean, he's made a lot of enemies even before he started with this kind of Trump stuff, just from having contrarian opinions on foreign policy and like really esoteric ideas within foreign policy. So I'm just going to go through the origin point, because this I wanted to do a slide on this, but like the origin of this news network was actually that he was invited, I think in 2015 or 2016, to a meeting where like the some of the members present were like the human rights service people, like these two lesbians who were there, and they had like Christian Tybring-Gjedde, who's like one of the more established people in the Progress Party. You had some of these like Michael Dublung. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. So you had some millionaires who were there, some prominent politicians and some journalists, and they were there to basically discuss that they needed to create a new political party, right? 2016, we got to create a new political party. And the idea was that, okay, this is basically going to be like, it's going to be like this broad coalition, big tent anti-immigration party. Like nothing else. It's just going to be like this centrist anti-immigration. And that was the idea that they were going to go with. And, you know, started by these two women, like these two lesbians in the Human Rights Watch. Which, of course, is like it really comes from those people not understanding the Overton window. I mean, these people in the Norwegian Overton window are just by default as right-wing as you can possibly be, by just being as anti-immigration and as counter-jihad as they are. So it's like they just don't understand. Like they are sincere, but they seem to just kind of lack a bit of that metapolitical thinking, where you think that you can
I don't think this guy does, but I mean that's probably why it ended up being
he didn't go with it. Like you said, he didn't believe in the project. But I mean, they proposed the name for that party. They proposed. You know what their proposition was, Walrus?
No,
Alliansen.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was the alliance. So basically, they scrapped it, and like Hans Johan Lysglimt took that name to create his own party. So that was really the original idea for the alliance. And I mean, reading through this book, like the Road to Reset, I've become a lot more aware of like this sort of, he talks about like the Norwegian cathedral, or like this kind of gatekeeping community that they have. And a lot of this sort of smear jobs that go on there. And surprisingly, like the financial newspaper Dagens Næringsliv, they seem to have been really over the top in like running these kind of bullshit smear jobs against Helge Lurås. Especially like, you know, because they were writing about these, you know, the event that I was talking about. They were trying to start this party, and they were really mixing facts together about who was there and who wasn't there. And they you know, recently they ran that kind of article about the WhatsApp group where like, oh, they have
I remember
Norwegian,
that. I remember listening to an interview with, we'll get to him later, Metapolitics, the millionaire, about him. Like, oh, you have like having to defend himself for being a part of a WhatsApp group where they talked about politics, which just sounds insane when you put it like that. But that's literally what it was.
We can't handle that. We can't have like you know, millionaires having WhatsApp groups talking about politics. That's pretty nefarious. You know, they
might start thinking about things.
Yeah, but it's like these sort of fever dreams that's cooked up by Dagens Næringsliv, and they're a financial newspaper. I you know, it's quite it's quite strange. Confusing. But you can flip to the next slide, and we can get do a bit more of a deep dive here. So I just wanted to include this one. Is that I just updated the grid here. So what we were looking at last time, and I just have the upper part of the grid. But I mean, since last time, I keep warming up to Steigan more and more. I mean, he was basically kicked out of his job for supporting Putin. Did you hear that?
No, I did not hear that. This can't be long ago.
No, I mean he's running that sort of blog newspaper Steigan.no, and he's also like managing this theater in Oslo. And it's not like a high paying position. It's not like he's sort of really, it's like this really big deal thing. It's just like this amateur theater that he's running.
Right.
And they had to basically kick him out of his position because he was sympathetic. Like he wrote stuff that was sympathetic to Putin.
Is this in light with like because I know there's been a whole lot of there's a lot of like Russian ballet performances in Norway that end up getting canceled because they're Russian, or either it's Tchaikovsky or it's like half the crew is Russian ballet dancers, so we have to scrap it because of solidarity, which I think is
burning Dostoevsky
very strange. But what was it, something like that, or was it just because he's
he just expressed that he was positive to he didn't follow the party line, let's just put it that way.
Okay, yeah.
So now they sort of took his job, but I mean he is a guy that is sort of, he comes from this sort of commie background, and he is basically a tanky, but he is just so against the system that he always ends up having the right take. It's quite impressive, and he does a much better job of assuring quality in his articles, considering that he has a lot of experience. He's been doing this in his entire life. I mean, he funded Klassekampen. That was the original kind of Norwegian Marxist newspaper, and then he went on to make something a bit more spicy later.
Yes.
So, I mean, this is what you have to choose from if you are kind of in our sphere, in Norwegian media, that's actually going to take our position here. So Dagen is like the sort of more Christian newspaper, the Dokument.no. And then you have Reset on the left side there. And I actually moved it further to the left because, I mean, this sort of informative schlock, instead of informative, I could have just put quality there. And in terms of that, I mean, a lot of the content on Reset is schlock. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's coming from the right place, but the quality assurance of the website, it's really not. It's not great.
That might be related to the money problems you were talking about.
It is. It's really like two problems. Is that they're actually trying to be a free speech platform, and at the same time having no money. So this is it's amateur hour basically.
Yes.
I don't know
where to send your money, guys, in chat if you ever want to donate to a newspaper. I'm just joking.
Yeah, you could probably buy up like half the shares or something at a reasonable price. I mean, there's not that many takers in it. Let's say if you have a little bit of money on your account.
Yes.
But yeah, we could skip to the next slide here.
Real quick, Vingle, subscribe to Vingle, which I think is actually Mongolian Doggerland, who's been sending me a lot of memes and private chats, by the way. What's the story on the Steigan guy? I get the sense I'm missing some context. Well, subscribe to Vingle. If you go back to look at the Scandinavian media stream we did, we talk briefly about Steigan and what he's about. I'm not sure if it warrants a full deep dive, but
I think I did the small explanation I did on him here is about as much as I think I can explain. Like, he was one of the original founders of Klassekampen. That's called the Class Struggle. That's the sort of Norwegian Marxist newspaper. So he has been basically in this kind of like Marxist anti-government media his entire life. There's an interview on the YouTube channel like Wolfgang V with this guy too. So I mean, he is just like based the whole way through. He's just going on about BlackRock and global finance and this kind of stuff. So he knows what's up.
Yes, he does. Most likely because he's of the quote unquote old guard. Do you want to move on to the next slide?
Yeah. Okay, so we're just going to go through a little bit of the Helge Lurås profile here. So he is a sort of credentialed guy. So that's that's the kind of thing you see in these circles. Like, what is the personality profile of someone who ends up running like this kind of borderline right-wing news network who wants to do this kind of thing? Especially with the kind of background he has. I mean, so when he was young, he was doing a lot of sports. He was into skiing. Then he went in the military. He became an officer. Then he goes on to sort of go back to university. So I mean, he has a master's degree of economics. I think it's called civiløkonom. It's like this Norwegian degree. It's sort of the equivalent of an MBA in the
basically
United States.
You,
Where I mean, he has a pretty broad degree. Where he talked about like he's a very like broad academic interest, even in terms of like philosophy and a lot of other topics. I mean, he says at this time he basically thought that Norway was boring, and this would probably be in like the 90s, the early 90s. He just thought like Norwegian politics is just insanely boring. He didn't even want to be in Norway because he thought it was just nothing was going on here. So he ended up then being recruited to be like an intelligence officer in Yugoslavia, where he's working with like he's actually working with CIA, and it's a funny thing. If you are more conspiratorial, you could probably imagine that there would be a connection to say that this guy is a plant or something. I don't believe it myself, but he admits himself that he has worked with CIA and MI6 and other. And this is not just like this kind of sniper copy pasta, hammer your chest stuff. Like I think he actually did that, and he explains it more in detail in the book. But like he goes to Yugoslavia to try to understand the situation there and get more into it. And what his takeaway from that, and like not just being able to see war for the first time, but he comes from this background in Norway with like the academic consensus, because now we're in like 1990. It's the end of history. It's like this Francis Fukuyama idea that now we're just going to it's just going to be peace. There's not going to be any more. It's just going to be smooth sailing and just economic production. We're going to watch MTV and listen to Limp Bizkit, and that's just going to be everybody's going to get along, and it's all just going to be this homogenous Fresh Prince thing. And that was like
no one's ever going to get mad that we're placing bases closer and closer to their border.
Nope, that's never going to happen. We're just going to trade with them, and we're going to be super friends. I'm saying this, and it sounds so ridiculous now, but the way that he describes it is like this was really like, if you didn't believe that at that time, you were kind of a kook, And but he's now standing in the middle of this kind of gunfire in Yugoslavia. That is sort of like this ethnic nationalist conflict, where you have like the Serbs that are like the Christian Orthodox, and the Croatians that are the Catholics, and the what's the third group? Is it the Slovakians or something that are like the Muslims?
Or was it the Bosnians?
The Bosnians, sorry, the Bosnians that are Muslims, and they're ethnically, or at least you say racially, they're quite similar, but they have like these very strong national identity, national religious identities, and there's just no way to reconcile that. It's just complete, like they just go back, they just default back to their national identities, and that's what he is getting in. Like, okay, the academic world, like this kind of bourgeois, Western developed world, is telling you like it's just going to be smooth sailing and Fresh Prince, but you're actually living in a war zone where you're seeing the exact opposite, and like that is the kind of the path to being a dissident for him, and it's a pretty cool one. It's cooler than getting mad about immigration or learning that like low carbs are good or something.
It's certainly, I can see how that sort of clashes with the but it's so strange, as you said, like sitting here now in current year and looking back on that and thinking about like how deluded can you get, so to speak, because the way I look at it now, this is just the way of things, this is how it's always been.
That's how it's always been.
To one degree or another. The sad part, is that bombs kill more people than they did before, but the human condition, as I said in in the video I posted the other way is it remains the same.
Yes. Then, I mean, after he is served sort of and been in Yugoslavia for a time, then he goes back to Norway. I mean, he's starting to sort of establish a family situation. I think he meets a woman that he gets married to, and they're going to live in Norway, try to have kids there. So he gets then employed at the NUPI. That's like the Norwegian Institute of Foreign Policy. You can click the link maybe just so people can get a look at it.
Yeah, I did, but the website is not that interesting, honestly.
No. Okay, we'll just drop it. But I mean, you're seeing
I can show it briefly, but it's just one of those.
Well, it's one of these standard things, but just like the people who work there apparently are not. They're not very interesting either, because that's what he was talking about, the kind of reality that he goes into, where he's like this kind of master of the universe, kind of like He-Man type, who then comes to work for this policy institute. And he says that the majority of people who work here have never been outside of Norway. They're just like full-time academics, basically. And they have like this very theoretical priorities, that they're more interested in theory than actual practical and any kind of applied science, and focused on just like publishing, showing up and trying to publish some research. It is like this kind of
this one. How does climate change affect peace and security in South Sudan? Why the hell does Norway care about that?
But this is the stuff they produce. You have this sort of humanitarian industrial complex in Norway, and this is a part of it. Like this, it's just ridiculous amount of money that goes to these people who sit in these organizations to like this sort of developmental NGOs. We talk about how we can help these, Sudan and Somalia and like Liberia, whatever, to, how are we going to deal with climate change and gender equality and this kind of stuff. And he was just so out of place in this organization, and he was himself being contrarian and confrontational, and he ended up basically creating so many enemies over time in this organization that they were like, the majority of the people were basically trying to either gatekeep him out, try to either just try to push him out of the organization, or gatekeep him from speaking in the media. In such ways, like they would basically object to him being put there, because he said, well, he would have the title foreign policy researcher in the media when he was talking about Afghanistan, and they would call in and say, well, technically he hasn't actually published any research, so he's not a researcher. He's actually an advisor.
You
can't have. It's not good enough that you have like a degree and you've actually been in doing intelligence work in wars. It's not good enough. Like, you have to sit on your ass and publish research that's going to be read by 3 people.
Yeah.
But they were basically just getting together and trying to really gatekeep him. And in some sense, you could say that, like, this is a part of like the Norwegian cathedral, but in another way, he kind of courts it in a way with the personality that he has, because he has like very little interest in trying to compromise with people, or trying to do more of this kind of like this type of Machiavellian Henry Kissinger handshake strategy. So I remember reading in the book that he was told by his manager that like 30% basically of the people, of the conflicts in the organization that were handled by the manager were about him. Like, it wasn't directly people confronting him. It was just basically people coming to the manager complaining that he was employed there.
Wow.
So
that's
he then ends up he ends up leaving the company and then creating his own business, where he just employed a few people. That was like, he created his own foreign policy advisory, like this kind of small think tank that lasted for a couple of years. And after that, he sort of transitioned from that by completing the assignments to start working on Reset. But like we've talked a little bit about Ludos prior to the stream here, and like the last point here is like, is Ludos sort of a boomer truther, or is he like a political realist or a kind of dissident? Because there's a bit of divide here. He is controversial, even sort of in the dissident sphere.
Yeah, it's I've had a hard time pinning him down when I listen to his own podcasts, his interviews or interviews done, of him,
Yeah.
where he'll often sort of walk right up to the edge and then refuse to to take the plunge, and then sort of retreats back into. But what this is really about is preserving our democracy
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
et cetera, et
Preserving
cetera.
liberalism.
Yes, which makes me think that he falls back to the Fresh Prince perspective, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's actually a tactic, because I feel that his heart is in the right place, and maybe he feels that going too hard in the public image is just gonna destroy his reputation before he gets anything done.
It's very hard to get inside the head of these people, and you have to think. I mean, if this was me in that situation, what would I be saying? How spicy would I be if I was interviewed on live television, or
Right,
if
and
people
as you
were,
said, it's easy for people like us who have like 20 viewers to say spicy stuff, and nobody's gonna care, right?
behind an
This
avatar.
guy, right? Yeah, and this guy is gonna put his name and his career and his livelihood out there. So I can certainly understand playing it safe. I just have some reservations.
Yep. I mean, if you go to the next slide here, I put on some points for and against, so we can sit and speculate a little bit. So I then put under the boomer truth here. We have the multi-ethnic journalist theme with the based trannies. I mean, it sounds like that's just some stuff that I'm reiterating as a meme, but this is actually true. Like one of the top writers for Reset is actually a tranny. I don't remember exactly what the name was, but it was something that he wasn't aware of because everybody were working from home at the time. But it was something that came up later, that it was sort of people were trying to use it against the against Reset, not from like this kind of for flanking from the right angle, but from the from more of this like, okay, well, how can you support this prejudiced organization and so on. He also has like one of this sort of Somali woman that's I can't pronounce her name, but who like writes books and
Sharika or something.
Sharika, yeah, I think that's her name. Who writes for him there, and he does come with that sort of line there. It's like, well, my editor team is actually multi-ethnic. Like the left are like the real racist, because if you look at the editor rooms on these other mainstream newspapers, it's all like middle class, bourgeois white people, and we have the real kind of in the trenches, a free speech dissident kind of diverse team. So there we go a little bit on the
I have one more thing to add to the boomer truth, in that he doesn't strike me as a very spiritual person, and from the interviews I've seen, and from the interview we played a clip from earlier, there is a period where this Progress Party guy, Helgheim, goes on a bit of a rant about how secularism is the way of liberalism and democracy, etc., etc., and Luros does not attack him on it, which leads me to think that he agrees, at least to some extent.
Yes, that's actually good that you brought that up, because he is not strong on Christianity, and when I mean strong, he seems to not be very well read on the Bible and Christianity, because like he has other books like Knefall and these sort of where he tries to diagnose what's wrong with the West and what's wrong with Europe, and he actually brings up Christianity as one of the problems. Like he talks about turning the other cheek and this sort of passive Christian morality, and I think this is a misunderstanding historically.
In a sense, he is correct in the analysis, but I mean, he's analyzing it because I also know he's been talking about those things, and it's true. We talked a bit about it earlier about the sort of the helping others at your own expense phenomenon that some Christians tend to engage in, but that's something that I think is a more modern phenomenon.
Yeah, at least I think his understanding of Christianity is a little superficial.
Yes.
We can just put it that way. But that also goes for the other guy. This is sort of Jon Helgheim. But he does that interview. It's like, I'm just like, I can't see this one. You know, he kind of understands that a lot of his constituency, or the people who are going to vote for him, are Christian. And like Helge asks him this sort of question. Well, you know, when people say that, you know, the like these Muslims who are shouting out from the rooftops, they're shouting their prayers out 5 times a day. That's just a form of freedom of speech. You know, is that true? I mean, can we put an equivalence between the church bells going off and the prayer calling? And he just says no. Like we're going to keep the church bells and we're going to remove the Muslims, but he can't really make an argument for it. He just says, well, that's what we're going to do. And he's not Christian himself.
He says we're going to do it because it's our tradition, but that's where it stops. He can't really go any deeper. He just says, well, that's because we're a Christian nation. And suddenly we're a Christian nation.
Suddenly we're a Christian
not wanting
nation
us to be, which is kind of strange. Yeah. It's a weird, he can't really, what's the put the square peg in the round hole?
No, he sort of just has to check a lot of boxes. I mean, that politician guy, he's not very big brained. I mean, for the foreigners, the subtitles actually make him sound a lot smarter than he is. If you listen, if you know Norwegian, you actually listen to him.
He does not use the formal or the high language.
No, he absolutely doesn't, and he just checks boxes. Like he knows he has to. Well, I have to throw some red meat out for the Christians, and I have to throw some out for the Islamophobic people, and I have to throw some out for the nationalists. But there's no consistent worldview there. He doesn't have like if he goes up against someone who's more intellectual in a debate, he's just going to get torn apart. Like these debates that he's talking about that he just loves doing so much. Well, he can't do anything but just says that this is what we're going to do because we're conservative and these are our values and blah blah blah. It's it's just pointless. I recall this Morgoth video where he talks about the why conservatism fails. And he says that, conservatism is like you have all these ideas about the free markets and freedom of speech and freedom of association and so on. And it's all like a solar system where Christianity is like the sun in the middle of that system. And the planets and all these other ideas are just like planets that circle around it in a kind of perfect harmony. But when you cut out the sun, like when the sun goes dark and you just have a bunch of rocks that are just floating, like all these ideas about we need the free markets and the property rights and low taxes and all this sort of
it's a completely it's void of any of the context that led to the success of these ideas in the first place.
Nothing is connecting them. It's just a bunch of loose ideas like rubble that is floating through space without gravity. It's such a great verbal picture of what's going on there, and that's all I'm hearing when I'm listening to him talk. But let's look at the good parts here. Is that he is anti-elite, and not just like on principle. He seems to just have this confrontational personality where a lot of the stuff he does, it just seems to be like he will get into these conflicts with the people who are in the bureaucracies and who are in this kind of like soft lower elite, and then they will try to sanction him, and then he gets even more angry at them and tries to get back at them. So he has just kind of locked himself now into a track where he kind of have to sit and spend his life like shit flinging at the establishment, basically. So, and I love it. I mean, it's exactly this kind of person that we need. Like he is like this far from like being I'm exaggerating here, from like being the Caesar. He just like, if he had a little bit more balls, he would like almost be this kind of like master of the universe Caesar person.
I mean, you're not wrong. If you take his personality and sort of extrapolate it, that's the warlord is where you end up, I think.
Well, I mean, yeah, he has military experience. Like he likes to do stuff like hang gliding and jumping out of air. I suppose
chieftain is a better, more
he likes to do view. He likes to do dangerous stuff, and he's not afraid of conflict, and he's not afraid of high stress, and he will work 16-hour days and try to attack people who he doesn't like. And I mean, like I said, I mean, he actually has military experience. You know, the Kaisar is when the military is more loyal to these individuals than they are to the actual system. So it's I don't think it's going to be him, but it's approaching.
It's a platform, and if nothing else, you know, it's he should certainly take the credit for having built the groundwork of whatever might come.
Because there is some metapolitical value to it, because he is just paving the way for other people to do the same thing. And it's a very painful process. Like it's not been, you know, comfortable for him to work reading this book. It's we'll get into it with the other slides, but it's just like a path of pain, basically.
Yeah, I mean, that is what we talked about earlier. Like later, this is obviously a smart, driven man with a good education that could probably just, you know, take it easy and work in some sort of financial job in Oslo and live like a king, basically.
It would be super easy for him to be rich. Like I'm not saying that as a sort of like, oh I love this guy, but I've sort of as I get more familiar with the private sector and see the type of people who are succeeding here, it would be easier for him to like make a startup company or be like a stockbroker or this kind of like investor speculating in stuff, just to having a high paying job, or there's many ways that he could have just gone to secure himself a lot of money with all of the energy and the resources that he has, but he instead chooses to basically attack people. He's just chosen to attack the people who are giving him the money. So one has to appreciate it. But we're just going to go down the points here. I mean, he has a metapolitical awareness, as you saw. He's been like some of these interviews. I mean, he is talking about kind of Norwegian replacement and replacement level immigration. That it's basically, you know, if it keeps going at a certain pace, that the population is just going to be replaced with other populations, and this is a negative thing. And he has like this very pro masculinity thing where he talks about, you know, the need for like all male spaces and men to get back into doing sports and say like being in the military. And he has even talked about, you know, being skeptical of having women in the military. So
he's gone very hard on that. Yep. And that's something I'll give this guy, and that's probably because of his personality. He's very good at one sort of flanking right wingers from the right, and also doing sort of Trumpian tactics where he manages to say something ridiculous to get people to talk about it, and then sort of just sit there and let, you know, make noise about it, but then sort of just back off, because then you've sort of introduced the concept into the normie's head.
Yes. And like, I mean, you know, he has the eyeballs, at least from where he is now. I mean, the like I said, the product is low quality, but he has a lot of eyeballs and a lot of people just paying attention to what he is doing. And he still has a lot of years left where he could do interesting stuff with it. So I think it's something to pay attention to. But we can keep going on with the slides and getting to some other interesting points.
The challenges of bootstrapping a right-wing news network.
So I put the Dante's Inferno quote underneath abandon hope, all ye who enter here. So we can start looking at some of the pain points. Like if you were going to try to do this, because this is one example of a metapolitical institution, it is a media organization. And if you wanted to try to start this from scratch, there's a lot of problems that you're going to run into. I think there's been a lot of people who will just have like a couple of beers and start talking, well, we should have like a news organization that just publishes stuff that we like or whatever. It's not easy. Like you think that, you know, it's you think this sort of, it's just a newspaper, right? How hard can it be to just write some articles and have people read it? But there's a surprising amount of challenge.
There's it's the people, it's editorials, it's the technical side of things with the
deadlines and the sort of demand
the
demand to always be on time with these sort of takes. It's actually, I imagine like being a journalist is like really stressful. It's like low pay for like a very stressful job.
Oh yeah, I know people who work in one of the larger newspapers, and with things like the Ukraine, it's all hands on deck for weeks at a time, where it's overtime, because that's what's happening, and you need to push out content.
Yep. Okay, let's keep
And that's
going.
just the grunt work, right?
Yeah.
Considering the editorial and keeping things on message, etc., etc.
All right, there's the first problem we run into here is the funding and the cash flow. So this is the point we touched on previously. I just write, ain't no government subsidizing this one. It's just a link back to something I showed on the media stream we did previously, where you see how much money the government is giving to a lot of these newspapers. And this reset has just got nothing. I mean, they have applied. I think they've applied where they could to get money. And of course, no, they're not getting press support. So where are they going to go? There's the second point here. We got the based. I put it in quotes because it comes with a caveat here. You have these three gentlemen on the side that are, co-founders.
These were all part of the dreaded WhatsApp group, weren't they?
I think so too. At least
so.
the two guys on top, maybe.
Yeah.
So, just a quick introduction here to these guys. You have Øystein Stray-Spetalen. I think he would probably superficially, he's like the most based guy.
Yep.
When you talk about a based public billionaire here, he didn't inherit money, as far as I understand. He actually made the money himself. He was first trained as an engineer, then he became like a hedge fund manager. So he manages basically a fund. He's sort of in finance, but he has a very thorough understanding of energy, because that's how he was educated. So he sort of understands energy markets and currency and so forth, and he usually will participate in debates when it comes to like the stuff we're in now with the new Norwegian energy policies and the cables and the energy flowing out of here. And
yep,
I mean, he has like a vaguely nationalistic standpoint, because you have a lot of these Norwegian billionaires that are like super global homo, like John H. Andersen. I think Kjell Inge Røkke is pretty bad like that.
I seem to remember an interview with this guy where he said, if I wanted to move my money out of Norway, I could. It's not that hard, but I don't want to because I believe in Norway. But that means that Norway has to believe in me too, and et cetera, et cetera. So
it doesn't sound very impressive, but I mean, considering if you are a billionaire and you could just move to Switzerland, and that's what most of them do.
Yes.
They move their money to Switzerland. They have lower taxes, and they just have dual citizenship. They're not very loud about it. But there was a big media ruckus about Bjorn Darley. He was one of these famous skiers who created like a clothing line later and became a millionaire. And then he moved to Switzerland, which is, of course, I see why people were upset about that. But the thing is that he's not even that rich compared to some of these guys. So,
no, not at all.
It's really not like this as big of a deal, but a lot of the stuff that's going on with these public figures is that they make a mountain out of a molehill, and
yes,
it's typical. So with Øystein, I guess he is at least superficially the most based. Then you have this guy Christian Mikkel Dublug. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. It's French.
I think you're onto it. Yeah.
And just a minute, just need to close the window.
Nordanon says that the guy on the top right looks Italian, and as Ludwig just mentioned, I think it's French.
It is,
but I'm not. Okay.
He is like this sort of mixed, like his father is like this kind of French Algerian, I think.
Right.
And he inherited his money. Like, he is the least rich among these three. So he inherited like this hotel and some real estate that's worth a lot of money, and he spent time just kind of renovating it, making money off that and reinvesting some of that money into other projects. Then you have the guy in the bottom here, so Jan Houdemann Andersen. I didn't know much about him prior to this, but he is quite wealthy. I mean, he owns part of like Kahoot, if you've played that at parties.
Yes, I have.
he was sort of a startup founder. He just owns a lot. I mean, it's a very diverse portfolio of startup like tech companies and real estate in Oslo and so on. So if you were to guess, Walrus, in terms of like contributions of cash injection to Reset, how much each of these contributed?
From each of these?
Yeah, I mean,
I have no idea.
you have no idea. Okay.
Yeah.
I will. Okay, I'll just say that the original cash injection on Reset was 1 million Norwegian kroners.
Ooh.
So how do you think it was divided between these three?
Between these three? Oh.
It's a funny little game here.
I'm gonna say that Spetalen is probably the one with the largest sum. Is that correct?
Nope.
Well, then I'm off. I don't know. Is it Dublu? Is he the highest contributor?
Yes.
Okay.
So it was divided like this. Christian
I would
Mikkel
not
Dublu
think so.
basically contributed 500,000, and these two like 1/4. So 250 Norwegian kroners. That's the equivalent of 25,000 American dollars. It's nothing.
Yeah.
It's an absolute pathetic sum.
In
like,
general,
it's laughable.
The actual amount is very small.
Yes, I mean, you think about how stingy and scroogey these people are, because Christian, like Mikkel Dublung, he is the poorest one. He's not a billionaire. Like he just has some real estate and some money in the bank. And but I mean, to a billionaire, 250,000 Norwegian kroners, it's like nothing. It's like wipe your ass money.
Considering that some of these get from the state, or have gotten in total millions over the years, that is very little.
Yes, and I mean, for starting up a sort of news network, how much burn rate do you think you have for like 1 million? It's not much,
No, I think you usually have the business plan, and it's probably a couple of years without any proper revenue, and so you probably need a couple of million, because or more than that, because if you're gonna like hire a good journalist with the taxes and the things you have to pay for keeping someone hired in Norway, we're easily talking about 1 million to 1.5 million Norwegian kroner every year for that person.
Yes.
For their salary plus taxes plus whatever else.
Of course, with like journalists, you can have them on part-time gigs, or they work on a cord. So that you're getting paid per article, so it's a little bit more wiggle room there.
You could have some wiggle room, but you still need a core to like run the business.
Yes, you do. So like Helge Lurås, I think he's just gone like 2 years without taking out a salary. He just took out no money from this fund. It was basically just to pay for stuff like hosting and like getting these journalists in. They had to pay to have a small office, and they paid for, marketing. There's, of course, other sort of running expenses there. There is another person, like you had 6 people who were founding it. So there's this third person who didn't contribute money, but his name is like Håkon Vium Lie. Do you know who that is?
No.
He is actually like the Norwegian Brennan Eich. Like he's been on the team to create the Opera browser, right? He created CSS basically.
Oh yeah, this guy. Yeah. No, I recognize the face actually from some articles.
Yes.
Yep.
And he was part of the team, so he made like the website, and he got the domain name, and the he puts up like the hosting, and he tries to take care of the sort of basic stuff. In terms of like
he was like
IT.
a pirate party guy, because he's like an old school hacker type.
Yeah, he is that too. But he wanted this. I guess that's one of the reasons. Like he actually believes in free speech, so he wanted this off the ground.
Right.
But I mean, that's not, already like you have these super stingy billionaires that give you a small sum, and they still demand to get sort of control in the company, and they're going to sit on the board and be pissy and demanding. Get angry at you if you ask for more money. So it's just one of these things that one of these things that you have to think about if you're going to go the startup route is that how much can you actually save yourself? Because getting someone like that, I mean, you can look at TV and you look at someone like Øystein Stray-Spetalen, or let's just say Donald Trump or some of these people, and you think, oh, that guy's based and he's so cool, but you just don't want to, like, if you're going to run a company, you want to have that guy over your shoulder
dictating
all the
what
time,
you're gonna
try to dictating how you're going to run the business and demanding stuff, trying to squeeze you out of ownership.
Of course,
if you can avoid it, you should.
Yeah, many of these are very hawkish
yes,
businessmen.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a reason they've made that much money, but I think you could do it without being an asshole as well. I mean, I don't want to make. I'm glad I'm behind this avatar, by the way. So if I'm just behind this avatar, so
meet him.
At least at one point I might have to go and like beg, kiss the ring, so I could get some money for a project. But yeah,
right.
It's just, that's why you really don't want to. I don't want to be too rude here.
No,
but,
and this isn't meant as any sort of personal assessment of these people. This is just the way they're positioned.
I'm just telling what's in the book about them.
Yes.
And let's see. I mean, so Helge Lurås, he talked to some other people who worked in media to just get him to give an estimate of what they thought would be like a good amount of starting cash for starting a newspaper from scratch. And they said like between 10 to 50 million. That's like the what they would see. That's the reasonable amount of money to do it with. And they're like on 1/10 of the minimal estimate. So it's just complete like shoestring budget newspaper. And like this is something that I started to think about when I look at it, and I think, oh, the quality sucks or whatever, and it doesn't look as good as it could be. I mean, this is just in the trenches, just throwing everything at it.
Yes.
So I guess props for that. In terms of money, they have
any ad revenue? Because I'm not sure. And when I've been on the site, they have very little advertisements.
Yeah, we get back to that. I didn't know how to divide up the presentation, but they've had trouble with ad revenue. First, because of the Google terms of service, so some problems where they asked people to click on links in the beginning, so they were kicked off, and then they were able to get back on again. But you have a lot of these Norwegian leftists that would just parse this website, and they would contact each individual sponsor. So say like you have like Thun Hotels or something, that would show up on Google Ads on Reset. They would call like the people who at the Thun Hotel. Oh, do you know that racists are asking for this?
It's the Coca-Cola Adpocalypse YouTube thing all over again, really. Yeah.
So that's what they were doing to them, and that's why they have so few ads, because they're not like ad safe. You have like these sort of Antifa types that will just call up all of the advertisers, and you have to explain yourself, and they're going to put it in the media. So that's cutting their cash flow. I mean, they're having like memberships where it's like they encourage, basically you can donate to them. I get into that later, because they were cut off like Vips at one point with the because they were too controversial. So they couldn't. You can't even get like
this
donations.
Is really just like dude, just build your own.
Just build your own. I mean, we're just going to turn the war machine against you, and it's a rigged game. Let's just say that.
It is.
This is playing the game on like hard mode. This is like extreme difficulty. Trying to play this game. So I think you could move on to the next thing here. I'm just thinking that this sort of cash stuff. I still think they're in the red, in terms of cash, but it's getting better, I hear. So you have the next point here, the institutional resistance. I didn't get just a minute. So that if you could click on the link with the Norwegian Editor Association, where they've been denied membership.
Yes, 1 second here. Here.
So this is like the Norwegian Editor Association it is exactly what it sounds like. And most of the most of the newspapers and most of the journalists have a membership to this organization, and what it does is just give you like VIP passes.
Yeah.
So you're able to get into parliament when there's like hearings, and if there's like big happenings in Norway politically, you're able to get a press pass, and they allow you in to basically go and ask you've probably seen it, like they'll try to hound down the politicians and, oh, what's your opinion on the inflation or whatever. It's like this because they have a press pass and they can actually get in there to ask questions. But they were denied, of course, because of some like it is basically some bullshit reason they weren't following the press code of ethics or whatever, which they themselves regulate. So just get back to the presentation again. So there's, or wait a minute, can you find like fritt ord? Because this is another place where they try to get funding. So you have the organization that's called Fritt Ord. It basically means free word, and it's like the Norwegian organization that's dedicated to free speech. Do you think they gave them any money?
Free speech organization did not.
Free speech organization. They did not give them.
Oh, that's strange.
Didn't give them any money. Interesting. I mean, you can note if you find their channel on YouTube, they have their comments disabled. By the way, I just thought that was interesting.
Oh, very
to point
nice.
Out. So it's I don't know whose free speech they're trying to help here, but it's I'm just pointing that out. I mean, it's like, oh, hypocrisy.
Ooh, yeah, this is a lot of. I recognize some words. This is heavy leftism.
Oh yeah, they need help with free speech. They these leftists, they don't have enough channels to
This
voice
looks
their
like
opinions
some kind
on.
of rainbow movie. Probably need some government money.
Yep.
They did give it to Minerva, which is good.
Yeah, but they're also pretty global homo, to be honest.
Yeah, of course.
Do you need do they need protection? I mean, to have these global homo opinions, just I'm pro EU, I'm pro free trade. Yeah, well, we can't, you can't win the culture war in a democracy, son. You need free speech to say that. Yeah, thanks.
Loyal Minerva is another newspaper in Norway. Again, if you after the stream check out the the Scandinavian media overview, we talk about them for a bit as well.
It is like this kind of classic liberal angled, a little bit as like a National Review in the United States. This kind of liberal democracy and rights, and that's the angle that they take. And sometimes they'll have something interesting, and the quality of journalism is good, and the intellectual level is good, but they fall down on the level on siding with the pause way too much. And that is just inevitable if you're going to go with this line that, the system is liberal and the liberalism is good. And we've been through this,
Yes.
Constant smear jobs by other news networks. I mentioned that. I mean, it's some of it had to be removed later, but they've gone with different angles to try to basically paint it as being as sort of right-wing as possible, or just making stuff up like you did with the WhatsApp groups, and they would. I'm sorry, I didn't do enough.
No, but from personal experience, I can remember, especially from when they started up, that every other news network was basically on their ass.
Yep, when they
painting them in.
I mean, it was really just sort of like a blitzkrieg there. Like I said, they were a sort of young network, and other similar websites like document.no, it's been a lot more peaceful. They don't get attacked all the time in media because they just they stick to more of this intellectual corner, and they report on things, and they don't publish as frequently. But Reset has gone more of like this kind of blitzkrieg route, where they have specifically tried to get attention and get viewership by targeting specific politicians at specific points. So that's one of the things. I don't know if you knew about this, but you have like one of these head politicians in the Norwegian liberal left party, like Venstre. It's like Trine Skei Grande.
Yeah.
Can you get her up on?
You want her?
Yeah, just get her up.
Are you sure you want her on the screen?
Yeah, well, you need to feel the pain. But I don't know if you've caught some of the controversy around her. Walrus.
Which one?
No, the one about the like the sexual stuff.
Oh yeah, nope, yeah, I've caught that.
So I mean, that was the guy. Like the reason that that this was that became a thing was actually that this is a scoop that Reset found. Basically, it was something
really?
that's sort of been mentioned in these journalist circles. That we know about certain politicians who have been, sexually harassing younger party members, and they've been sexually harassing people who are younger than them, but they're being protected because they're not. They have the right opinions, or they're like the right gender.
This has been a thing sort of going on for years, where stuff have been dragged up from what happens in internal party politics on several of the parties.
But they were able to dig up stuff on her that was basically that she sort of quote unquote raped a sort of younger man who was 17 at the time, where they sort of they met at a wedding when she was like in her like late 30s. I think she was like early 40s, late 30s. He was barely 17 or like 16 at the time, and he was drunk, and she basically dragged him out in a wheat field to have sex. Right, and that's
I'm trying to find images of her in the wheat field because I know they exist. I can't find it right now.
You could probably imagine that, but it was basically understood. Like she was just going on trying to hit on every man at that wedding. And that's something that's been going on like in the eternal sort of party politics. It's been reported that she's been doing this when she was a teacher. So at that, like when she was in her 20s, she was sort of doing it, trying to hit on students that were like 16. I mean, it's a lot of it's been covered up, and Reset try to use that as like the sort of draw in when they were coming out to basically, okay, we have this scoop, and we were able to get some information from people who are in the know, and they try to basically push really hard to pull out all of these articles when these sort of like these socialist when like the liberal left, they were having their annual meeting, like there's like this biannual meeting where they have to vote on who's going to be like the leader of the party, and she was like the incumbent leader, and they were they were questioning if they were going to vote her in again, and that's when they released the articles about these sort of sexual scandals. So it is like this is like information warfare basically that they were doing, and they were getting a lot of shares on social media, and so there was a lot of attacks back and forth, and like Ludos basically said that I'm never going to get this kind of press support if I I basically just write myself off that, because if I keep attacking these like main politicians,
it's certainly putting a target on his back.
Yeah, get the government gives. So he's really putting a target on himself there. So she was basically, at the time, he sort of, Ludos sort of accredits himself by saying that she was supposed to be the Minister of Education, but she was actually demoted to be the Minister of Culture because of this scandal. So you can imagine that there's a lot of people, and this is not the only thing that he's the only person that he's sort of attacked using Reset as a kind of tool.
Just for context, Minister of Culture is one of the lower, political positions you can have if you're a minister. Usually, the Prime Minister is just top, and then the Ministry of the Financial Minister, I think, is sort of like the second in command, usually.
Yep.
And then there's a couple of others, but usually culture is quite low on the power ranking.
It is. Like if you go with like finance or health or something, that's a little bit, you're a little bit higher up the chain. But I don't have anything else on her. I just like to comment that if you've ever perused one of these kind of dating apps, or you've looked at some of these hookup services, and you try to like find women in your area that are actually interested, they all seem to look like that.
Yeah,
I heard it from a friend, by the way. I've not seen it myself. So
no, I have. No. I would like to say I've never used Tinder, but that's a lie. I've used it once. I paired with a girl, and none of us said anything, and then I deleted it.
Oh, yikes. So let's see there. The intellectual gatekeeping is, of course, there. I mean, you still have like all of these enemies that he has from the NUPI. That's the the Norwegian Council of Foreign Relations, that keeps us saying that he is not credentialed to speak on things, and he doesn't have the education, or he doesn't have the. He's. I mean, he is really credentialed, but they keep pulling out all this sort of like really trivial. Petty stuff to discredit his
and he doesn't have
views
the right credentials, etc., etc.
Yep. So here's something I mentioned this in the previous slide here, but they were taking off Vips. That's like the Norwegian Venmo. It's sort of simple payment service that's almost like the state monopoly for mobile payments. They've been put back on it now, just for clarification. But I mean, they did actually start to say, well, this is too controversial. We can't have you on here. And it's quite unheard of in Norway. You usually don't see them like remove services from it. I've not heard of it in any other cases.
That is very unusual, but that's also probably why it got put back. Either backlash, or maybe they actually ran into the law.
Yep. So the same thing, the Google ad thing I mentioned as well. So I mean, there are more examples. I'm just kind of picking a few here to sort of show what you're running into if you're going to try to do this type of operation. Because they're going to they bring out all the guns.
In chat are hounding me for the Tinder thing. Look, I'm sure if I reinstalled the app, I could probably show you that I have like one conversation on it, and it's also yes Nordan, and it's very Norwegian. To not talk to someone you paired with on Tinder. Subscribe to Vingles says, rumor has it that Mrs. Walrus has yet to speak. Mrs. Walrus is of the opinion that what I am doing here is some silly man stuff, and she refuses to. She has better things to do, frankly.
Yeah, you're in the man cave. You have to find a hideout.
I have retired to my study, and I'm going to talk to my fellow racists on the internet. So
you got a room in the closet there behind the clothing, and this little computer screen, and then a mic, so you're crouched over with neck pain.
Yes.
Yep.
No, I'm lucky to have my own office, thankfully.
Oh, okay. You can just keep flipping the slides. So here's a little bit more. I mean, this is a huge problem here. The problem of then content creation and content moderation. So the first problem you run into is then just like finding people, and he talks about that. It's like he had people who came on that were friends of like the Dublung and these investors. Is like the people who show up is like, oh yeah, I really believe in this stuff, and I'm going to be a journalist, and I have so many opinions, and they just can't produce anything.
Yeah.
Especially when you run, like you talk about running operations with low pay and deadlines. It's really hard to find people who can perform. So I put the picture here. It's from like the sort of 90s film, like Major Pain. It's the only thing I could come up with. But like you have like these, you just have a bunch of misfits that you're going to try to produce good content.
To make something useful, yeah.
I mean, the type of people you end up dealing with is this sphere as well. Like I said, glowies and psychos and losers. I'm not aware that I've interacted with too many glowies, but you have people, unfortunately, like when you are in these kind of dissident, more extreme spheres, that are either like some of these people are just have some slight personality problems, or they're basically kind of social losers, which is also it is an angle. I mean, it is typical that you're angry at society, basically, if you're
it's like I said earlier, like once you are outside the Overton window, you're suddenly in the same space as everyone else who happened to find their way outside, and you can't really quality assure them, because they might be a stoner who acid his way out of took acid, and now he's seen the universe, and that's how he happened to be in the same room as you, right?
Yes. It is. It's a little bit like being bullied. I remember that from like elementary school, where everybody who's sort of socially functional, they have some clique that they fit into, whether they're doing like football or model airplanes, or makeup or something like that. But if you don't fit in anywhere and you're just rejected, you just end up with a bunch of rejects, and they are all rejected for different reasons. And you just have to kind of make it work. So let's say, the average journal profile, like you have the typical Norwegian, Asle Toye, we haven't talked about him that much, but he uses the term like the precariat, like this new social class that is like this, the journalist, that is basically like the disenchanted middle class children, like children of like bourgeois parents who have gone into journalism thinking that they were getting something lucrative, but they're actually not making a lot of money, and they're under a lot of stress, and they're sort of taking that out into creating a lot of this sort of rage porn that you see in the newspapers. And they all come from the same, like this sort of kind of like Norwegian middle class leftist holier than thou background.
Yeah, and they're going to become a journalist, and they're going to, save the world and write pieces like there are a couple of like journalist movies. I don't remember the titles, but that probably made an impact.
Woodward and Bernstein type,
right? Yes, they watch these films and like, I'm gonna be,
just highlight Lucky Pants comments.
Trump. Lucky Pants,
yeah. So this one, I actually think Asle Toye is like a gateway. Really, I'm of a different opinion there. I think he's sort of like, his books are like, if you're gonna do like this kind of starter kit for red pilling, like the trilogy there of Rødt, hvitt, blått, jernburet og gullbrikkespillet. It's actually like for just to introduce a normie to like these dissident ideas like white flight and the problems of immigration and atomization and all this sort of stuff. Like, he has like this very normie friendly way of putting it. Are you familiar with his literature, Walrus?
I have tried to get his the Jernbur, the Iron Cage, but for some reason I couldn't get it at any local, so I might have to go to the web. But that's as far as I've come on him. But I am aware of him.
Yes. I mean, when you're as red pill as you are, you don't really need the books, but they're a good read anyway.
No, that's why I've seen, like, I haven't made it a priority to get it. I was just, looking at the local bookshop or like if I could like pick it up there, if I could like order it online and pick it up there, but I had a hard time doing it. So then I was like, it's not worth it. I have like 4 Spengler books I probably need to get through for that, which is going to require a lot more of my
I gotta
mental
fill up
strain.
the radicalization meter before I do anything else. But okay, the maintaining quality of what's being produced there, it's a lot of work. The strain on mental health, if you click on the link there, just for background information, the guy that's coming up now, because this is a timestamped link from one of these Wolfgang V interviews, is, they had Helge Lurås basically as the working editor, working unpaid, but they were able to get in another guy who was supposed to be the new editor. And he was actually not a like a total noob with this stuff. He actually had experience as an author, writing books and writing for these different, like, he'd written for like slightly based newspapers like Dagen and Klassekampen. So you'd think that he sort of knew what he was doing, and he's coming into this basically thinking that I'm going to be the editor and we're going to have to turn the newspaper around. But he's sitting and this is after, like, he's been there for 1 year, and he's having like this long interview describing, that's his name, Lars Akerhaug. He's basically gotten depressed and had to take sick leave, so he's just like permanently on welfare and just has to stay home because after like 1 year of working on this kind of reset stuff with the high workloads, super like the long hours and like all of this sort of criticism and shit that you get both from like the mainstream media, from previous colleagues, and from the people in like the comments there and on Twitter, it was just too much for him. So you can just listen a little bit here because he actually like breaks up. He almost starts crying, and it doesn't sound like he's faking it.
Wow. Okay, let's
Let's
give it a
take
listen.
let's
I
take a
don't
listen
think we
here.
have this subtitled, but maybe the
No, we'll
emotion
just
will come
translate. It's
through
not.
anyway.
It's not. You can just listen until the section cuts there.
Det er en del som skriver veldig mye og bruker veldig mye tid der. Og så tilbringer vi jo veldig mye tid på nettstedet også, da. Det er jo litt sånn der som de her big-tech-selskapene tenker at du skal konsumere mest mulig tid hos oss. Ja, og noen av disse kjernepublikummerne til Dokument og Resett tilbringer fryktelig mye tid på nettstedet, og det er klart at det bidrar til å øke viljen til å donere og gi penger. Så du skaper en veldig sånn, skaper en veldig sånn lojal gruppe av kjernelesere. Samtidig så er det helt åpenbart da, at det i denne gruppen her, hos disse nettstedene, så finnes det mennesker med, som jeg sa i sted da, de har hatefulle holdninger, som har rasistiske holdninger, som de dels har høyreekstreme holdninger, som de kanskje må pynte litt på for å komme gjennom i kommentarfeltet, men som likevel ligger til grunn da, for mye av det de skriver.
Hvor mye er det da?
Nei, det har vi jo ikke noe sånn, det er jo vanskelig å vite da. Men jeg mener at det nærmest et hvilket som helst kommentarfelt du leser i disse mediene. Da er det lett å se en undertone som er veldig sint og hatsk. Og jeg tror...
Oh,
Yeah, that's
he's
fine.
complaining about right-wing people on a right-wing website.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds ridiculous the way that he's putting it, but he had to not just deal with moderating all of these, like the writers that they had on staff, but also moderating the text of all of these anonymous people that were writing in there, and then moderating
fair,
the comments.
You know, the comment sections on a lot of websites in Norway are pretty, like, crazy.
Yeah, that's the trend, right? I mean, on YouTube, they solve that with artificial intelligence. They just like parse they train some AI to pick up if you say something they think is extreme, and then you just get soft banned, or it just gets like soft censored
Or shadow banned.
shadow banned.
I've noticed that myself, that sometimes if I go to my, like, the overview of my videos, it'll say that there's like, let's say 10 comments, but I can only count 9.
Oh, yeah,
and it
typical.
doesn't tell me why, or it's not like, because sometimes it's like, hey, you should probably review this comment before you publicize or before you show it on the
No, it doesn't say anything.
page. But no, it doesn't say anything. It's just it says 10, but there's only 9.
I've had it happen myself. Like I try to write comments on, like, even on like the I was trying to write comments on some of the community posts that you've made, where I was trying to write a little bit about what we were going to cover, and then those just get censored like immediately.
Right.
And I've tried to experiment with it too. It's like certain things that they pick up on. So I've tried to, you post it. You open the incognito window and you look at the same video and you see it's not there. And I try to remove something from the, sentence or remove something from the paragraph. And then I look again and said, okay, now it shows up. And then I edit it and put it back in, and then it removes it again.
Yeah, there's some keywords, I think. So,
yeah,
but this is a human here doing all that that work.
So it's a human being. I don't think he was ready for like the. It's not like the you have to watch one set of commentary. I think it's like a constant like fire hose pressure of shit that's just being like squirted in his face every day. And I just think he wasn't, he's not this kind of like Ludos Chad type who can just sort of he's like Teflon. I think this guy's like kind of sensitive, so it really got to him. And it's like, this is sort of a bit of a warning here about the work hazards of dealing with being kind of a dissident or trying to run some right-wing stuff when the mainstream culture is hostile. Not just dealing with the craziness within the right wing, but also kind of the pressure that's on the outside of it. So yeah, that's the strain on mental health there. The opportunity cost is something that we talked about it multiple times already. I mean, if you're smart, and if you you're going to do this, so you have to think about like you're giving up on. You could have made more money somewhere else. Like every hour that you're spending doing this, you could be safer, being safer, feeling better, having more free time.
Yeah.
doing things that you like in terms of hobbies, but you have to just be in the ditch basically. So
You need
and
the who was it? Was that Academic Agent talking about like the right wing vanguard needs like a set of eunuchs who can be more or less 100% sort of like dedicated to the cause.
yeah, it does.
And
It does
that's,
help.
you know, this is sort of why you need that. All of these things, you know.
Yeah. I mean, you think we have that already? Would you? The incel movement is as big as it is, but
Well, fair enough, but I mean, once they, you know, once they get their shit together and meet a woman, they're out, you know.
yeah, they're never getting their shit together. I mean,
Well,
it's a funny thing that I saw on one of these when I was discovering the Distributist for the first time. He did some videos where he's trying to talk to people from the incel community, and it's just absolutely toxic and just hopeless. He made this comment. Yeah.
The other thing is, you know, is the incel the type of people you want? I mean, to be honest, if you're an incel for a longer period of time and you adopt that moniker and you choose to live sort of the neat life, you're not the type of right winger who produces something of value. And
you
that's
might
not
be
really
you might
someone
be
want
a
on your
eunuch,
side.
but it's not a high performance.
You're a eunuch, but you're not doing anything. You know, that's.
But the comment that the Distributist made is that he said like the what's called the manosphere can sort of be split up into three groups. Is that you have like these the incels, and then you have these kind of like divorced husbands, and you have like the pickup artist crowd.
Right.
And you would think like from his perspective, from like this traditional Catholic perspective, that, you know, in terms of how useful these people can be to the Catholic movement, you think that like the incels would be that like they're basically celibate already, so they could take all that, you know, that energy that they have and be monks and just be creative. And like, I mean, with the divorced men, this sort of, okay, they've sort of kind of failed, but they tried monogamy. They were sort of interested in trying it, so you could get them back into it. And that the biggest problem would be with the pickup artist, because they're just like completely bathing in degeneracy. But what he found was the exact opposite. Like, I mean, you have a lot of these like say Rouge V who went from being like a pickup artist to just sort of seeing the problem with that and becoming like this orthodox priest. And like with the, you know, with a lot of these you know, like the pickup artists have high initiative. A lot of them are very high performance, so they can turn that into high performance for another cause. But
that
with these incels, they're just like total losers, and it's like there's really nothing they can do. It doesn't really matter how much they try to focus their energy or anything. They seem yeah.
Loel says, and we need high T incels. To me, that feels like a contradiction. But you might be right. I think you find more T in a homosexual that can perform the same function, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting question. I am skeptical to the pickup artists. I see their hedonism as something that, you know, it's a failure of their character, regardless of whether or not it's impressive that they can manage to woo women. It's kind of like you're trying to have your cake and eat it too, and it's not sustainable, and you can't build a society on it.
What they're doing is really destructive. It is destructive, but they have like the fundamental kind of energy there. Like the energy, the will and the energy is kind of there, and you can use that to try to build something else. You could turn it into something positive. But like with people who have no will, who just kind of sit inside and feel sorry for themselves, there's nothing to work with.
That's true. That's true.
That's kind of where, at least what I think about it.
The burning hatred of women can be turned to something productive, maybe.
So, but just a quick point there is also like, where do you draw the line on this kind of content moderation stuff? Because, you know, Reset is just going in and out of this kind of Islamophobia or this kind of counter jihad thing. And, you know, okay, how far is too far on immigration and Islam? Because that, it seems like within the Norwegian Overton window, that's the only things that actually exist for the right. But there, I mean, being in the sphere that we're in, there's so many other topics. Like you could talk about the the Israel question, the women question, the traditionalism, the kind of like cultural degeneracy, and all of these things are just sort of like, it is ground that's not paved yet. I think somebody needs to, that would be a part of the Metapolitical project, is to try to pave the way to normalize some of these topics again. I mean, they have been normal in the past, but it's like trying to, find a way that can sort of hammer a space where that can be something that is discussed. And I think Reset's going to do some of the lifting there for the immigration, but with some of these other this other sandwich list of topics in the dissident sphere, you need people to do that job.
And it's sort of like you got to pick your battles kind of thing as well. You can't
do
attack all of these at once. Yeah,
you hear me, Lysglimt. You can't you can't fight them all. It doesn't work like that. Right, we can look at the next slide.
All right.
So we've already been over this a little bit here.
Oh yes.
I put this picture in here. I mean, this is basically like a septic tank diver.
Yep.
Which is what you're dealing with these comments. That, I mean, it's not just particular to right-wing content, although it has that dimension of being spicy, but it could just be regular comment sections on celebrity news, and it will just turn into like this complete like monkeys flinging shit at each other. It seems almost inevitably to just turn into this this total chaos, and you have to find ways to sift through that. And the problem then is like with the trade-offs here, because as the guy Lars said, who was the previous editor at Reset, the people who come to Reset, they come for the comments, right? They want to be there because they can go and do these comments. So they
can go and talk about whatever they want. Yeah,
you could get rid of the problem of all of this kind of uncivilized behavior by censoring them. But then they're not coming to your website anymore. I mean, they're coming for that, the ability to say whatever they want. So you have to constantly making these choices on how far is too far. Let's see.
Bell Curvis is commenting, you have to moderate to some extent to exile subversives. Sorry, this isn't a free speech zone for knuckleheads. Yes, that's we touched on this a little bit in the beginning when it comes to like, I'm sorry, but if you want to know what we're talking about, you're going to have to do some you're going to have to watch some of our earlier streams, or you're probably going to have done some reading. And if you don't understand, then I'm sorry, but I can't help you.
Right. But I mean, you could look at these two links here, because you have some more of this institutional pushback here. You have the Conservative Party that I put in quotation marks here, who, I mean, this is one of the guys who is pretty high up in Høyre, the Conservative Party, who's basically try to object that he's gone up publicly and said that like this, the comment sections in Reset is some of the worst, like most hateful stuff he's ever seen in his life, and you probably shouldn't be allowed to have them there. You should consider getting the police involved. Or you have like the guy like Lars Gule from the Norwegian Humanist Association. Yeah, here we go. Jan Tore Sommer. Received a physical reaction to Reset comment field. I'm getting physically ill. I had to take breaks. Toughen up. Toughen up, son.
I'm sorry, people are saying mad things on or bad things on the internet.
There we have a screen cap there of
what I'm trying to see what people are saying, but it's like taken totally out of context, so it's kind of hard to. Yeah, no, it's cut off, so it doesn't make much sense.
It's cut off, so it doesn't make much sense. You could look at the other link there as well. So I mean, that guy, from the humanists there, you have he's basically the head of the Norwegian Humanist Association, Lars Gure. I mean, this guy he is something else. He is like this sort of super active kind of like internet troll, basically, and not in sort of like a funny way either. He's been kicked out of a lot of forums because he just can't shut the fuck up. Like he's just, I wouldn't be surprised if he shows up here. Like he's going to be in the comment section and fact checking or something. Like he's just going to be
like
in the chat.
in our comment section.
Yeah, in our comment section. Yeah, I mean, like from what I've seen from this guy, he's just
I didn't think I'm probably on the list somewhere.
I mean, yeah, he is like this extremist researcher, right? That's what it says, extremist researcher, Lars Gure. So he's always sort of paying attention to his researching. he's got a microscope on this stream.
If you're listening to this, I just want to be left alone. That's my policy.
I just want to be left alone.
I literally just want freedom of association.
Yeah, if you're listening to this, lose weight. That's my tip. So I've seen this guy on the train to Oslo at some points. It's a funny part that with the Norwegian celebrities who don't have a lot of money, they have to take the train.
That's true.
So saw him then sleeping with his mouth open, snoring.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, he's just sort of all over this sort of stuff. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but like he is. When he was younger, he was actually carrying like a backpack full of explosives into Israel. So that's sort of funny. There is like this picture of him where they have to carry him away.
No, I can't say that. I was going to say something, but
no,
that's something that happened.
It did actually happen. So I think he knows a few things about extremism himself. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot more to add. I don't know if you have anything else to add on comment sections.
I think we with this one and the other one, I think we covered a lot of the topics here. Let's go to the next one. Wrapping up. All right. What are the low? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, what are the low-hanging metapolitical fruits? That's sort of the question that I try to ask myself here. Because you have on the right here, you have like the fable or the story of the fox and the grapes. I think it's very easy to fall into that mindset. Is that I can't reach the grapes, so it's probably not worth it.
Yeah.
It's just so easy to be in this sphere and just always default to this sort of thing. It's like, oh, it's unreachable. I can't do anything. But just to have like a bit of this, try to think a little bit about, is there some low hanging fruit here? Because you have to get the low hanging fruit. You can't just try to get the grapes. There has to be some way. I mean, would you remember that photo with all of the bubbles?
Yes.
Symbolizing the Metapolitics. There have to be some space that can be taken there on that map. That is where you're able to capture a bit of the map to just squeeze in a couple of points. It can't be like this complete, like they can just be everywhere at the same time, all the time.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I was thinking about it. I think there is a space, and it ties into current events, because the future in Norway in that sense is a bit interesting, because we've been hit with sort of like a triple whammy of issues that sort of all stem back to the same one, or maybe it's a double. I'm not sure how to categorize it, but we have the conflation of the energy prices, or the energy crisis, quote unquote, in Norway, that is the result of us joining an international trade network for energy, which results in us being affected by that said international trade network, which we didn't have to be previously. Of course, I'm sure with the war and everything in Ukraine, the energy prices would have risen to some degree, but right now they've been severely increased since I'd say about was it November last year?
Yes,
and this is a globalist problem. so to speak. The only reason we have this problem is because we joined this international trading network. If we didn't, we wouldn't have this problem. It's as simple as that. Now, of course, if you add on top of that the fact that the only ones making money out of this are the politicians and the people at the top of the energy companies, and the people paying for this are, well, the everyone else. This is why this is such a hot topic issue in Norway. Now, that's one thing. And then you have a slowly and steadily increasing inflation that's been happening over the past 2 years because of one, because of the Americans printing money like crazy, and since we deal in a lot of oil, we are more than other countries linked to the dollar. And the next one is that I'm trying to remember. We had some quite severe measures during COVID, which I think are coming back to bite us in the ass now in terms of like the economics of it.
Yep.
Now that's of our own making to some extent.
Oh, it is.
but the Americans printing money is not our fault. But we're getting hit by that now.
Yeah, everybody's
And
being hammered by it.
On
I
top
think.
of it, yes, and on top of it all, as a cherry on top, there's the war in Ukraine, leading to sanctions against Russia, leading to counter sanctions that absolutely destroy our gas prices.
Yep. Might affect food soon as well, I think.
And it might affect food soon as well. And I don't see a way out of this, politically speaking, that doesn't result in a space opening up for a nationalist voice in terms of Norway needs to be more robust, because this is a triple whammy of things that are out of our control. We're not the ones sanctioning Russia. We're not the ones going rah-rah, except for, the leader of NATO. But the Americans are the one who sort of indirectly put us in this situation, and the Germans are the one who indirectly put us in this situation. Not on purpose, I can understand that, but it's our fault for believing, or our politicians' fault for the last 70 years for believing that globalism is always going to be a happy, fun time world where no one's going to be mad at each other, and we can all just sort of be a tertiary economy and make nothing on our own soil. There's absolutely no reason why we should rely on anyone else for energy. There is absolutely no reason why we should rely on anyone else for food, especially considering, I mean, of course, sure, I won't be able to buy avocados, but I should, at least in times of crisis like these, we should be able to feed ourselves. Like, there's no reason why we shouldn't. The same goes for gas. When I say gas, I mean petrol.
Yep.
Now, sure, refinement, et cetera, is not an industry we have here, but there are alternatives.
Yeah, it's interesting because they can't even go with this just buy an electrical car because the gas prices.
No, because they've been doing that
the
for
electricity prices.
Yeah,
have been,
that's what I'm
going
saying.
up and,
there's no way out of this that doesn't result in like a power vacuum politically for someone to say, hey, this is a really bad idea. We should be more robust.
Yes,
and that turning into nationalism.
Kind of like in Oslo, where you have a lot of people voting in the Greens, and they just make it shit for everybody. It's impossible to drive there, and just make everything really difficult, and people get angry, and they start looking for alternatives. And it's like that happening to almost the entire country. So I agree, there has to be some openings there in the future. But I mean, equivalent to the problem getting worse, they have to trump up the war machine of the media, constantly just barraging people with stuff to keep them disoriented and unable to focus on something long term.
The populism of it, in the sense that, I go to the store and everything costs 25% more than it did 2 months ago. It's hard to quell that. So it's something to look out for, because that energy, can be directed either way, really.
Yep. There's a lot. There is pain here, and there's a potential in that. When everybody's happy, it's just kind of boring. You can't do a whole lot.
No. So it's not exactly metapolitical, but it's a future that I think is coming, and
you have to ride the waves, right? You can't just start from nothing.
And being ready with an answer when that comes is can lead to some opportunities, I think.
Yes. You want to do questions?
Let's do questions. I have started some questions along the way. If you have any more questions or just want our hot takes on any current events or other things, post them in the chat, and I'll add them to the list. Now, this is a bit... this came in pretty early. Nordanon asked, how does one explain to a normie in this country why counter-jihadism is bad from a right-wing perspective in an optical manner?
My question is, why do you have to explain to normies why counter-jihadism is bad from right-wing perspective? Because the normie thinks counter-jihadism is bad from a normie perspective.
That's fair. If they're already interested enough to ask, I'll say, and this is probably the more spicier version you can give, is to say that you don't take the counter... You say that counter-jihadism isn't about... Well, the point is that Islam/immigration isn't the problem. It's a symptom of the problem. The problem is that we've had a system that has allowed for this to happen. That's the problem.
Yes, I could fill in a bit more on that. I mean, you have to sort of, a lot of these right-wing parties, like the guy you saw in the video, Yoon, I think guys like him, okay, they're just going to do the debates and they're going to do this information work. So they want to enlighten people, because that's why this has happened, is because our politicians didn't understand, quote unquote, that, it would be a problem to integrate these kind of Middle Eastern people with their religion into our society, which I don't believe in at all. It's I'm just going to question that idea that they did this because they didn't understand it. It seems almost kind of ludicrous to me that they didn't understand that this would, this would be difficult to do, maybe impossible, and it would be
I'm
costly.
sure they knew it was going to be costly and a difficult job, but I think they believed they would be able to pull it off, and they would get brownie points for doing it. So
get brownie points, and they could de-radicalize them with pornography in 3 generations or something.
Sure, and they might be able to. That's fair, but. And then you have the more cynical view that a politician might think that, well, they're certainly not gonna vote right wing.
Yep.
Once they get here,
the counter jihadism also has the problem of really just putting us on the wrong side of a lot of issues. Like, say that they like the Muslims, they want stricter gender roles or gender hierarchies. Well, that's good. You don't want to sit there and try to fight for feminism and say that Islam is bad because of feminism, or Islam is bad because of hierarchy.
That's the reason there have been debates about whether or not Islam or feminism would win, because a lot of right wingers were like, well, a lot of the things that Islam push for are quote unquote traditional values, so maybe that's a way to integrate it. But it's mostly just a waste of time to try. But the perspective I would take would be that counter-jihadism and the reason for counter-jihadism is just a symptom, it's not the problem.
Agreed.
Unreality asks, where are you from in Norway, Walrus? I'd rather not say. Just
you got our first Fed in the chat here.
Maybe.
I'm just kidding.
No, it doesn't really matter. I'm sure I can get doxxed sooner or later if anyone really wanted to try. But
well, you could. I'm
sure some people have their have their suspicions anyway. So
I think if you watch like all like 20 hours of material, you can pick up certain facts where we're talking
Yeah.
about things, and like, okay, you could only say this if you live in this place, or
Maybe.
people who sound like that come from here, and like you learn all the dialects of Norway, and then you can try to piece together by all of these.
Yes.
It's like Dark Souls lore or something. You have to look at item descriptions, and then you can, eliminate, figure out
Yes.
who we are. So.
I would be very interested in hearing Walrus's take on the Captain Sabretooth question, and that was what political ideology he belongs to. I'm I'm gonna have to base this off of like old. Okay, for our international viewers, there's a big thing for kids in Norway. It's like a theme park,
Show the pictures.
it's a zoo that also has like a huge thing, a live show with this pirate captain, and there's like TV shows and probably games, etc., etc. It's a huge thing if you're like a boy and you're like 4 years old. This is the good shit, and it was. But this is like old 90s Captain Sabretooth lore, because that's when I was a kid. So I would have to base it off of that. And I'm trying to remember. What do you think, Ludwig? Do you have any experience?
I need to rewatch this show. I just like the songs are catchy. I think the songs are actually
That's
still really catchy.
They're pretty good.
And I don't know. I don't
He's
even
an
remember what
enterprising.
happens
He's
there.
an enterprising individual for
He's
sure.
a free market capitalist. He loves
He's a
Israel.
free market
and,
capitalist. Yeah.
he loves Israel and Jesus, and that's I don't. Think so.
I don't think he does that, but.
I don't know how political pirates are. It's I mean, they're political in the sense that they're they punish their enemies and they reward their friends, but they're not ideological, I think.
Nordanon says, I don't appreciate this vile anti-incel rhetoric from Mr. Walrus. Well, I guess I just have a disdain for giving up. I think I see inceldom as a form of giving up. One thing is accepting your celibacy, but sort of like rolling in your own self-loathing is just pathetic to me. I don't know about you, Nordanon.
I don't know. I get a lot of entertainment out of this, and sometimes I do think that it would have been at some points in my life easy to kind of fall into the same sort of wallowing pattern there. But I get a lot out of.
But that's
like,
also the easy way out.
Yeah.
I can. I'm going to sit here and just look at
black-pilled
2D women and be black-pilled and browse sad threads on 4chan and play video games.
Yes.
But I mean, what kind of existence is that? I'd rather try and fail, is my point.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of fun with this sort of stuff that incels produce online. If you looked at the incel wiki at any point, I mean, it's a riot. Honestly, it's I mean, they put so much time into sort of creating their own dictionary and these characters and scales and tables and sort of maps on how they understand the world. And I mean, I do that for like entertainment. I just go and I sit and read through these articles, all the stuff they come up with, or you go to these channels, these black pill channels, where they'll make compilations of things from TikTok about all these women who talk about, if you're under 6'5", don't talk to me, little bitch. It's like it's just all over. They watch clip after clip after clip after clip of like these women. It's like, well, look at this guy, he's balding, and haha. They just sort of reinforce this this kind of hopeless situation there.
He says, incel is a word feminists and leftists call you when they disagree with them, so I've just decided to own it, just like being called racist. Well, fair enough. If that's your definition of incel, then, the bar is pretty low. So I can understand that.
Well, you do you, I guess.
I just think, if you're going to be a quote-unquote true incel, I'd try being a Christian first. Because then at least you've tried.
I mean, with the incel, it is sort of implied that you kind of you can't get these women, right? You just it's just impossible, and I sympathize with it because there are a lot of movements in society that just make it really difficult for men to find women. There's so many streams out there, and a lot of these channels who talk about it. We could do. I don't know if we're gonna do a stream on that at any point. I feel like it's been covered so much already. Is there anything
sorry,
else?
I was muted. Yeah, no, I agree. I don't know if it's any worth in covering it anymore. Nordanon also says that I have the cringe guttural R dialect, and I'll have no lip from a Northman, so we'll leave it at that.
That's the first clue to figure out where he is in Norway.
Well, that's quite broad, but yeah, that's the first. Well, that's two clues, considering. Loel says, I remember seeing Russia in the 90s, a slim blonde woman civil servant in her late 40s with a $200 haircut, selling her clothing off a rack in the street market because she hadn't been paid in 6 months.
Interesting.
Yeah, hard times,
So that was like when the oligarchs were made in the 90s, where I mean, Keith Woods has a great video on that. When you had, I don't think it was Boris Yeltsin or something that came in there to just be this American puppet thing, and then they were just going to slice up the entire Russian economy and give it away to some of these mafias. A lot of people with a specific ethnic background.
Bell Curve says, I don't want to be an incel. I'm also a little old to date after losing my wife to Oxy. I'm older than a lot of you folks. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Bell Curve. But thank you for hanging out with us youngins. I got married before Tinder. I can't help it's all changed now. Yeah, and that's, maybe I'm an old soul, but that's also what turned me off. It's I just didn't mesh with maybe it's a Norwegian thing too, I don't know. But I don't mesh with the app dating at all. Like, it's all of my romantic interests have been through like people and that you meet in real life. So okay. Subscribe to Vingle says, why not subscribe to Vingle today? I've heard the application process is set to become quite lengthy and arduous once it hits 100 subs. Act now while it's easy and while it's free. That's true. You should all subscribe to Vingle.
Vingle Starks is going to the moon, so you gotta get in on the floor.
He posts some interesting art related content and sometimes interviews, etc., etc. So it's a very good channel to just.
I like it a lot.
When you have 5 minutes, there's usually something new that expands your horizons a little bit. I would say for the young guys that church is probably your best bet for a compatible mate. Good luck. Stay away from medicine that kills. Yeah, maybe. The church in Norway. Yeah, maybe.
I think it is easier.
I have a bit of a skewed. We talked about this, I think, last time. I have a bit of a skewed sort of introduction to these things. Because I had such a stable family life. When you have good examples, it's easier to navigate these things, and you learn pretty quickly to identify the good and the bad potential mates. So I didn't have to go through church, but if you're unsure, I think that's a good place to start. I mean,
I think so too. If you don't want to go the party route, because Norway's not a big country, and there are certain, it's not explicit, but there are certain ways that things are going to happen if you're going to find a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And like usually it's going to be like, if you're going to go the secular route, I mean, you could of course just meet somebody, you could pretend you're a foreigner and just go talk to someone publicly, but usually it's not how it happens. It's like you're gonna meet someone at a party. You're gonna get invited to a party, and you're gonna be introduced to someone that someone else knows. So you sort of been pre-selected, and then you might like get to know that person when you're intoxicated, drunk. Maybe you get a little bit frisky.
It's the way we do things here. It's all our culture.
You get a little bit sort of frisky.
You get into bed and then you
do
go on a
something
date.
physically, and then you try to go on a date later. Typically, or like if you're not into that, then I guess you should try to look at the church or some sort of hobby type.
Yeah, that's a good way too.
Type community. But I think that is also the problem with just showing up to church is that there's no pre-selection there. You're just some weirdo showing up. Like, I mean, if your family is in the church or you have friends who bring you there, you're kind of like pre-approved. But that's my experience. If you're not, if no one else can vouch for you, it's really hard to approach women unless you're like really sort of like a 10 out of 10.
Oh yeah,
looker.
Yeah, you're not gonna have much luck just walking up to girls and.
No, it's really hard. I think a lot of these pickup artists say that too. In like Scandinavia, it's difficult to do these cold approaches. It's very suspicious in this country.
Does the king still have to be a Christian/Protestant? I've heard conflicting reports. As far as I know, yes. And it's not the king in that sense. It's the crown prince and the queen to be, which is his daughter. They are all Christians, and they have to be, at least for now. Who knows if that will last? Okay. I think we have...
Things are slowing down a little bit.
Yeah, things are slowing down, and we're nearing 3 hours, so I think it's time to wrap it up. Thank you all for joining us. If any of you are here, this is maybe a bit late to say it, but if any of you are here coming from Prudentialist's channel, thank you all for checking me out, or checking me and Ludwig out. He's been kind enough to post about this channel a bit lately. So I've had a bit of an influx in the subscriber count.
I see we had like 13 viewers now. We've had as much as 20
at some point.
Yeah. So this is higher than we usually get. We've had like maybe like 6 to 8 people, I think, at most from the other streams.
Yeah, and I like that. It's it's I'm not necessarily all about the sub count as much as the quality of the subs, but considering this is most likely from the sphere, it's nice to get some more friends. Okay, with that, I think it's time we end the stream. Thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. If you're listening, thank you for reaching all the way to 2 hours and 56 minutes. And we'll be back probably next week. Okay. Goodbye.